Hello, puppies and kittens. Hope everybody had a happy Hello Days meeting with the fam and all that.
I had a happy goodbye days.
Mm.
Tell me.
No, it was awful holidays. Holidays are always awful.
Yeah,
My
that's why I
very-
call them Hello Days.
Yeah, I had to go to. I got roped into doing Hanukkah with the family, and that always sucks.
Ooh.
So
What do you
Okay.
get any good gifts on Hanukkah? Because 8 days of presents sounds
listen,
awesome.
the thing
but-
is, the thing is, they just give me money, but I don't want the money. I don't care about money.
Give me the money
Okay.
then.
I'm not a money-minded person.
I'm not either,
Really? You
but
prefer-
unfortunately, we live in late-stage capitalism. So
True, but I prefer nothing. I prefer just to not go, to not celebrate anything. That's what I
So
prefer.
basically, you were bribed to stay with your family celebrate for several days.
No, I was actually guilt tripped into it, but
Yeah, but you got the money, so then it's also a bribe.
sure, yeah, I guess.
I feel for you. I don't do any of the holidays anymore, really. Anyway,
I won Christmas morning. I gave more than I was supposed to. So, ha.
okay. All right.
Oh,
so,
I did get a new shirt for Crinklemas from a friend. It's another Hex Girls shirt,
nice.
but you know what? That's one of my favorite things. Love the Hex Girls.
Yeah, I can see why.
Yeah.
That's totally the right vibe for you.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So we are moving into 1 Kings times 13.
Yeah.
And any opening comments on it?
Well, if you're looking for a passage of the Bible where you have the God of the Old Testament, Yahweh, conspiring to assassinate a believer, someone that was called a prophet, just like that. Or here it is. We've got one coming up, so stay tuned, folks.
Oh my God, is
Good.
it time to bring back out the narcissist bingo cards?
Yeah. Well, my next question was, who's going to be reading today, Lilith?
I walked right into that one, did I? Are you volunteering me, or am I going to have
Okay.
to throw Lawrence under the bus?
I'll accept
He is
your offer.
muted.
He's not feeling well.
I totally thought that was him volunteering you.
Alas, yeah, it was my fault. I got sassy. All right.
I would say that I feel like this seems to be like the first time that we start getting like, oh, the writer's thinking like, oh yeah, what was the wife's name? What was the mother's name? I think that might be something that should be part of the story. Like,
Oh my
you know,
gosh,
they're
are
not just
women
name-
people
you know-
again? Or not really people?
No,
They're
no,
like
no, they're not, no.
2/5 of a people. They're
No,
almost
this-
people. It's like a pet, right?
Is what's it called? The Bechdel test or the
Bechdel
Bechdel
test,
test, yeah.
yes. We won't.
Bechdel?
Bechdel, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we actually
Bechdel.
fulfilled that in Ruth. That was the only book thus far.
Oh.
But of course, it was written later.
That makes
so.
sense. Yeah, but that was
Yeah.
probably written after all of this. Yeah.
Oh yeah, hella yes.
You know,
Lawrence.
like honestly, like around the same time period. It's not necessarily after, but probably around the same time period. Maybe a little bit after, not that long. But yeah, there are a few places where they put, like, honestly, from a biblical standpoint, too much emphasis on like naming or talking about women. Like I remember there was like, and from a biblical standpoint, I mean, you wouldn't expect so much detail about random women in the Bible. So there's I forget which prophet, either Ezekiel or Jeremiah, I think, or I forget which one, but the name of their wife pops up once and then says that they died, and that was it. And that was it for the wife's story.
Well, it's a bit like Normie's husband and sons.
Yeah. Yeah, they were plot devices. But the important thing is that he was married, and so that's what's important, right?
Mm-hmm. Even Ezra
All
said
right.
so.
In the most obvious case of prophecies written after the fact that totes came from way long ago for realsies, guys.
Read up through verse 10.
Of course.
Thus
By
spoke
the
Lord.
word, yes, by the word of the Lord, a man of God came from Judah to Bethel, as Jeroboam was standing by the altar to make an offering. And he cried out against the altar by the word of the Lord, "O altar, altar, this is what the Lord says. A son named Josiah will be born to the house of David, and on you he will sacrifice the priests of the high places, who will now make burned offerings here. And human bones will be burned on you." That same day, the man of God gave a sign. "This is the sign the Lord has declared. The altar will be split apart, and the ashes on it will be poured out." When King Jeroboam heard what the man of God cried out against the altar at Bethel, he stretched out his hand from the altar and said, "Seize him." But the hand he stretched out towards the man shriveled up, so that he could not pull it back. Also, the altar was split apart, and its ashes poured out according to the sign given by the man of God, by the word of the Lord. And the king said to the man of God, "Intercede with the Lord your God and pray for me that my hand may be restored." So the man of God interceded with the Lord, and the king's hand was restored and became as it was before. And the king said to the man of God, "Come home with me and have something to eat, and I will give you a gift." But the man of God answered the king, "Even if you were to give me half your possessions, I would not go with you, nor would I eat bread or drink water here. For I was commanded by the word of the Lord, you must not eat bread or drink water or return by the way you came." So he took another road and did not return by the way he had come to Bethel. Cool story, bro.
So obviously, this comes from a time period that is not from the reign of Jeroboam. This will come from I'm guessing around about Josiah's time.
I'm just like
Round about
imagining the boy king getting read this story, and he's like, "What? I'm gonna burn people's bones on an altar?"
Why would
He
I do
was-
I
that?
guess if the prophet.
He was raised by cultists to take the throne
Yeah.
and be a vindictive, psychotic king. So, yeah,
But this is
Yeah.
one way of making him do that. Is like, oh,
Yeah,
you see, it's
absolutely.
a prophecy. You have to do this thing.
It's a
Here, little
prophecy. You gotta burn people on the altar.
Here,
Like,
little
oh, well.
Joey.
In that case,
I mean, it's worse than German fairy tales. Here, little Joey. This is the bedtime story of how God prophesied that you would burn a bunch of people. Sleep tight.
Yeah, would this be one of those things where something must have happened enough times where there's some sort of polemic about it and shows up in the Bible, like, hey, let's not do this because it was happening.
There was something about this that reminds me of just the way that people embellish things too. Back in the 80s, I went to a funeral where this guy and his drug dealer and all of that were at the funeral. It was just kind of weird and charming at the same time. But we went out into the desert. He died in a mountaineering accident. So he was cremated, and his mother took his ashes out to the trails that he used to climb. And she wanted to spread these ashes out all over these trails. And they fell unceremoniously on the ground, just plump. And it was kind of anticlimactic. So she comes up with something real quick to say that, well, he will be tracked up these trails for all of eternity now, and this is what he always wanted to do. And that was a nice way. That was a nice save, you know. But as we start to leave, then the wind catches the ashes. There's like a whirlwind kind of thing, and the ashes are lighter than all of the sand around them, so they just whisk right up. And went on up the trail in a very spiritual fashion, and it was a neat thing to see, and everybody that was there was emotionally moved by it. And I'm just thinking, what if one of those people had been a storyteller or a scribe? That's how shit like that gets into these kind of stories. And then if it's not somebody that's important to the story, we'll just change the name to make it the person that is important to the story. And then we've just appropriated that.
Yeah, that's a good call. I mean, that's absolutely, they do that all the time with leaders that still live today. It's worst, I think, in North Korea, where, Kim Jong-il only played golf once and he got, 6 holes in one, and he would never be able to top that. So he never did it again. And there were witnesses and the birds sang.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, if like the culture war people were writing their own version of this sort of stuff, they'd be writing things like, oh, and the Civil War happened because there were male prostitutes in the land in those days, which is we'll get to.
100% would have been
Next
that.
time. You know what I mean? Like, those bad things happen because of the things that we're doing now that we think are bad.
I mean, how many times has God brought war on a people because dem titties be out, though?
Okay, I think I should start on verse. Thank you, Aaron. So we'll start on verse 1. A man of God. Traditionals identify the man of God with Iddo, based on Sifrei Deuteronomy 3:4-2. Kimchi notes that according to 2 Chronicles 9:29, Jeddo, in Hebrew Ye'edo in Kireh and Ye'edi in Ketiv, has prophesied in the days of Jeroboam. Josephus also identified the prophet as Yadon or Jadon, according to Antiquities 8:231. Cogan writes that the term man of God is ascribed to messengers of Yahweh, such as Moses in Deuteronomy 33:1, the man who revealed himself to Samson's parents in Judges 13:6-9, and Elijah in 1 Kings 17:18. This man of God is later called a prophet by the prophet of Bethel in verse 18. Sweeney writes that the anonymity of the prophet is inherent to the narrative, since it reflects a local tradition concerning 2 prophets who were buried in the same tomb near Bethel. He writes, quote, "The prophet's origins in Judah are essential to highlight the tension between Judah and Israel concerning the legitimacy of the Bethel altar," end quote.
Yeah, I didn't think of it being an etiology for the double burial maybe was a thing that they found, and then the story was connected to it or whatever. Yeah,
intriguing. I mean, this is a lot of mythology built up around an already well-established place of worship. It's just interesting to look at the nuances of it.
On verses 2 and 3, the prophecy is very accurate and is referring to 2 Kings 23 verses 15-20. Although DeVries
I wonder
writes,
why.
Yeah. Although DeVries writes that this prediction constitutes a misreading of those verses, which mentioned that Josiah slew the priests of all the Samaritan high places, but says nothing about sacrificing them. Several traditionals, like Rashi, Kara, and Abravanel, take the human bones to refer to Jeroboam's bones, but the prophet said human, in Hebrew Adam, to pay respects for the king. Cogan writes that such accuracy is not typical for a prophecy, and it's a sign of an, quote, ex eventum prophecy, end quote, i.e. a prophecy written about an event after it had occurred, and is presented as if it was said in the past regarding the future. Fritz, following Wuthwein, writes that the threat of the man of God was originally directed against the king himself. He writes that DH changed the older word of Yahweh in favor of a threat that will be fulfilled under Josiah.
I mean,
Maybe.
from you said that the last suggestion was that that there was originally not about Josiah, that they changed it to Josiah. Was that the last suggestion?
I think so. Let me just see. From his commentary, it was only the DH who changed this older word of Yahweh in favor of a threat that will be fulfilled under Josiah.
Okay, I mean, just looking at the context of it all, that seems really unlikely. This just seems like an addition. But
Oh, yeah. It is possible. I mean, when you're trying to implant an idea in the collective consciousness of a nation, it helps if you repurpose something that at least feels vaguely familiar. So I'm sure they have plenty of prophecies that they could just crib a few, a few words from get the flow. So it's like, oh yeah, that sounds familiar, But yeah, obviously it's very
Although it's
retcon.
I
kind
mean,
of
it's possible
interesting
that
how it's kind of interesting how often the motif of like, I mean, not necessarily sacrificing, but killing people on an altar pops up in ancient histories. There was this battle that what was it? Thucydides talks about it. And this, I think this is actually like in order to fulfill this, like some prophecy from, God, was it Athena or something? They, uh, like there are these people that were like they were sitting on an altar that, or they were, they were trying to like hide from the attackers. I think this is in book 1 of Thucydides, but I don't remember the exact context. And then they get killed on the altar. And that was like supposed to have like, like, oh look, the prophecy came true or something like that. But I think that was in book 1 of Thucydides.
It
Uh,
seems very clear that killing people on an altar that aren't like deliberately intended to be sacrifices, like killing the priests, is a way to defile the altar
Yeah.
and de-sanctify it. And actually, I was, Francesca Stavropoulos, I was reading the God and Anatomy book, and she talked about how the one altar they had built like what looked like a giant toilet seat and put it on top of this altar. Basically, like whether or not it was ever actually used or whether it was like a emblematic version of my God shits on your God. We don't know, but it was clearly, it was about defiling and desanctifying the altar by ritual impurity, which always involves very gross things like charred bones and excrement.
Now on
Sounds
the
about right.
same on verse 2, altar. Traditionals take the calling of the altar twice to refer to the altars in Bethel and Dan. Others, like Kim Chine ben Kaspi, know that this is the way of calling, quote unquote, as seen in Genesis 22:1, Exodus 3:4, and 1 Samuel 3:10.
Yeah, someone in the comment mentioned like we've had like a snake talking to a woman, a donkey talking to a man, and here we have a man talking to an altar.
That's funny.
But
But yeah, the latter that Tomer mentioned to me just seems more likely. Like yes, they do say it twice a lot. They don't have to be talking to two things.
they do. It seems a bit like an activation. Like I was watching Jordan, TikTok, the guy who reads all the recipes, and he was
Peterson, Jordan Peterson. Look,
No,
is watching Jordan Peterson.
No, not that Jordan. Ew, what's wrong with you? And he got like a toy that you voice activate, and you say a catchphrase, and then it'll do whatever you want. It's a Transformers, like anyway. But it's same sort of thing where you get like a voice activation of if you call twice, and then because this is the mythos, is that God gives you the power to order nature to do your will, as long as you're doing it only occasionally for something melodramatic for him, because God is a petty drama bitch.
Okay, on verse 3, the altar will be split apart and the ashes on it will be poured out. DeVries comments, verse 3 continues with the prediction that Josiah would set a confirmatory sign to the effect that the altar would split open and pour out its residue of fat. This is not mentioned in 2 Kings 23, and it is not clear whether DH intends the statement of its fulfillment in verse 5 to have occurred in Josiah's time, or at the moment when our narrative's king's arm withered. To say the least, this seems irrelevant to the narrative and shows a blind fury on DH's part.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
It's
Like
this will be the sign, right? So it's a sign that I am a man of God. Something happens straight away. Take this prophecy seriously. No.
Yeah, but it's pretty petty and raging. I mean,
yeah, because he's this prophet, right? Man of God, would essentially be saying that like he is now making like the connection between the sin of Jeroboam and the sin of Josiah, but like in a period after Josiah, like this you'd have the same sort of thing where you'd have to question, well, like, why did this happen? Well, there it is, because it was a sacrifice instead of just a slaying or something like that. So
It wasn't murder, it was a holy war.
so it's so portraying Josiah this way does link him with the sin of Jeroboam.
I would add that let's keep in mind that part of the element which a burnt sacrifice is pleasing to Yahweh is the aroma, right, of the burning of the animal. In this case, you would have to posit that Yahweh also might take delight in the burning of human beings, which is crazy to me. I don't.
Well, maybe it's supposed to be like, the god the idol that they're worshipping doesn't want human sacrifice, so by putting a human body, you're displeasing him with the smell. I don't know.
Either way, you're really
Yeah.
insulting God if you burn his priests on his altar. There's no way for him to take that as positive. But yeah, it's
especially I think it's supposed to be like a symbol of destruction. Like, we're gonna burn the altar down to the ground with the priests on top of it.
It still has that feeling, though, of the petty, vindictive rage. It's very much like, Aaron, I know you've seen this way too many times to count, the conservative Christian vibe, the Trumper vibe of, you just wait, we're going to get ours, and then you're all going to burn, and I'm going to sit there and laugh. Jesus loves you.
Okay, on verse 4, the hand he stretched out towards them, the man shriveled up. The Hebrew for shriveled up is tivash. And Rashi comments, the Holy One, blessed is he, avenged, or spared, according to Mikrot Gedolot HaKeter, the honor of a righteous person more than his, i.e. God's, own honor. When he was standing and offering sacrifices to idols, his hand did not stiffen, yet because of slandering the righteous person, his hand stiffened. End quote. DeVries writes that the withering of Jeroboam's arm, together with its restoration, is used as a provisional proof of the man of God's authenticity. Sweeney notes the relation between the withering and the account of the challenge to Moses' leadership by Aaron and Miriam, in which Miriam was turned into a leper for daring to question Moses' prophetic authority because of his marriage to a Cushite woman in Numbers 12. He writes, quote, this points to tensions between Judah and northern Israel, insofar as the northern king challenges the Judean prophet. The northern king must beg the Judean prophet for assistance in restoring his arm. The power of the prophet is confirmed when he prays to Yahweh on Jeroboam's behalf so that his arm is restored. End quote. On verse 9, that's the final comment. Several commentators try to give a rationale to this command. Kimchi wrote that although the prophet was not allowed to enter into a city of idolaters, he only entered to warn them. Because the people saw that he entered their city only to tell of his prophecy, they prevented him from eating and drinking there. Moreover, in order that they'll not know the way to go to Bethel, he was prohibited to go back by the road which he came from. Gersonides wrote that God makes a point, that the people bring no benefit, even giving the prophet food or drink, and there is no benefit going back since the people didn't repent. Cogan writes that the limitations represented the rejection of the sinning Israel. It is not allowed to be in company with the sinning king, and it's not allowed to go back through the roads of the cursed kingdom. Sweeney writes that eating and drinking are characteristic activities of Israelite worship, insofar as the sacrifices of meat, grain, and fruit. He writes that the command to not return by the same road perhaps presupposes that he would bring a curse back to Judah. DeVries, however, writes that these commands seem, quote, arbitrary and irrational, end quote, but that is the point. Quote, the man of God's complete subjection to the divine purpose can only be tested through laying on him conditions that may seem unreasonable and burdensome to him, end quote.
Yeah, that sounds like religious thinking. But honestly, it just sounds to me like the king was totally planning to kill him. And he was just like, nah, dude. Nah, can't go home with you. God said, also no food. I'm not eating anything poisoned. Peace.
Yeah, that's it for my commentary on this section.
I mean, if this is an etiology for, like, here is an existing double burial of prophets or something, and they're trying to make the story make sense with what they're trying to say, then they have to find an excuse for why he was killed and why he ended up going this other way past some other person, you know, where the burial is. Like, oh yeah, this is where this other prophet lived, and he ended up meeting him, and then he ended up dying, and then they ended up getting buried together. Like, maybe it's just like it's just part of the plot to say, yes, he can't go back the way he came because that wouldn't take him past the burial place from the high place or whatever. Maybe.
Okay. I think we should continue. Oh no, wait, there are comments.
Ah.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so Minute Rights 1954 says, Aaron, there's something wrong with your video. There's no danger noodle in it. Snake nerd. And then Matt White says, Aaron, if God didn't like the aroma of burning man flesh, why did he condemn so many people to Moloch? Yeah.
He only likes long pig.
Yeah, and overcooks it. Anyway.
Yeah, we should continue.
I mean,
yep.
Does Yahweh condemn people to Moloch? Is that a thing?
Well,
I thought he seems to hate Moloch.
It would have been a Moloch's Moloch's sacrifice. It would have been a certain type of sacrifice, not necessarily condemning people to Moloch.
Lilith?
Of course, good sir.
Yeah, finish the chapter.
Happy to. Now there was a certain old prophet living in Bethel, whose sons came and told him that the man of God had done all that the man of God had done there that day. They also told their father what he had said to the king, and their father asked them, which way did he go? And his sons showed him which road the man of God from Judah had taken. So he said to his sons, saddle the donkey for me. And when they had saddled the donkey for him, he mounted it and rode after the man of God. And he found him sitting under an oak tree and asked, are you the man of God who came from Judah? I am, he replied. So the prophet said to him, come home with me and eat. And the man of God said, I cannot turn back and go with you, nor can I eat bread or drink water with you in this place. I have been told by the word of the Lord, you must not eat bread or drink water there, or return by the way you came. The old prophet answered, I too am a prophet, as you are. And an angel said to me, by the word of the Lord, bring him back with you to your house so that he may eat bread and drink water. But he was lying to him. So the man of God returned with him and ate and drank in his house. And while they were sitting at the table, the word of the Lord came to the old prophet who had brought him back. And he cried out to the man of God who had come from Judah, this is what the Lord says. You have defied the word of the Lord and have not kept the command of the Lord your God gave you. You came back and ate bread and drank water in the place where he had told you not to eat or drink. Therefore, your body will not be buried in the tomb of your fathers. When the man of God had finished eating and drinking, the prophet who had brought him back saddled his donkey for him. And as he went on his way, a lion met him on the road and killed him. And his body was thrown down on the road, with both the donkey and the lion standing beside it. Some people who passed by saw the body thrown down there, with the lion standing beside the body, and they went and reported it in the city where the old prophet lived. When the prophet who had brought him back from the journey heard of it, he said, it is the man of God who defied the word of the Lord, and the Lord has given him over to the lion, which has mauled him and killed him, as the word of the Lord had warned him. So the prophet said to his sons, saddle the donkey for me, and they did so. Then he went out and found the body thrown down on the road, and with the donkey and the lion standing beside it still, not eating it, because reasons. The lion had neither eaten the body nor mauled the donkey. So the prophet picked up the body of the man of God and laid it on the donkey and brought it back to his own city to mourn him and bury him. Then he laid the body in his own tomb, and they mourned over him and said, "Oh, my brother." After burying him, he said to his sons, "When I die, bury me in the grave where the man of God is buried, and lay my bones beside his bones. For the message he has declared by the word of the Lord against the altar in Bethel, and against all the shrines on the high places in the towns of Samaria will certainly come true." Even after this, Jeroboam did not change his evil ways, but once more appointed priests for the high places from all sorts of people. And anyone who wanted could become a priest, and he consecrated for the high places. This was the sin of the house of Jeroboam that led to its downfall and to its destruction from the face of the earth.
Yeah, so we have these competing prophets, I guess.
Yeah.
But it is interesting. This whole chapter is interesting
Yes.
because it's like, I mean, considering how like the next chapter starts, this I'm getting a feeling that this chapter was just a later edition, for a whole bunch of reasons. But
Yeah,
Oh,
like
God.
all these wars and kingly deeds are recorded in some other book, but let's put in this little story of some priests.
It doesn't make any sense. The old man is a prophet. He goes and lies to another prophet and double crosses him, gets him to do the thing with the food, which of course, because obviously he died, so it had to be his fault. And then at the table is somewhat possessed by God and prophesies, "Now I'm going to kill you." And then they fucking finish eating. And he
I love that.
sends him
Yeah.
away on his own donkey.
see,
Why
this
would-
is
Why would
what
you
family
start
dinner
killing when
feels
you
like.
still got food on your plate?
I guess if you're gonna die anyway, but then he like takes care of the body and mourns him. It's like, you got him killed, motherfucker.
Well, I would note DeVries' opinion. He writes that these both stories are actually originated from the same story. This is basically he writes that several recent commentators recognize that it is truly a single story in spite of the apparent new beginning at verse 10, such as Knoth, Hosfeld, Meyer, Dietrich, etc. Most critics say the provenance of the story is Judah, but the present writer, A. DeVries, has argued in the above-mentioned work that it must have come from a circle of Bethel prophets, since the only Judite witness to what happened, the slain man of God, never returned to tell about it. Yeah.
The part that gets to me is how, like, God's supposed to be aware of what's happening, right? So he just lets the old prophet go off on his deceit, right? And then all of a sudden, like, he corrects him, and now he's got the right message. But guess what? Now it's too late. The man has already eaten the bread. So now let's just go ahead and assassinate the man.
Yeah,
I don't know. That just seems so far.
nobody's motivations here make any kind of sense. I mean, the bit about the guy from Judah never made it back, that you mentioned, Tomer, that could very easily be a case of, we are writing this prophecy in Judah to be like, oh, this happened way back in the day and it prophesied Josiah. Well, how come we've never heard of it? Well, you see, the prophet died on the way back. Well, obviously he wasn't a good prophet. No, he disobeyed God. He disobeyed God, and so he had to die. So blah, 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 side story, ridiculous motivations. The fuck is with this old man? No sense was made that day.
I do want to say that the old man is called a prophet, as opposed to a man of God, and it seems to be that it could have been like his job title, and just like Balaam is, he's a prophet, but then God actually speaks to him sometimes. It seems that this person isn't necessarily so like he lies to him either because he's like, oh, this guy is he did a miracle, I want to eat with him, and he wants to give him respect or whatever.
The moral of the story is, any liar can say that they're a prophet. God will not
though-
correct liars who say they are prophets.
Not until
Um,
after they've justified him murdering you.
Well, it seems like there is the in verse 18. Where is it? The word he was lying to him, kicheshlo, which seems like a gloss. Like, at least according to DeVries, he writes. That this
You
is a
think maybe
late
the
at-
original story is supposed to be like God
Yeah.
actually sent an angel to trip him up
Yeah.
as a test?
Yeah, he writes that the gloss is a late attempt to rationalize the Bethel prophet's words.
Every single story from here on makes sense, more sense, not sense, but is less ridiculous if you have two different gods who don't like each other.
Maybe.
Also, like titles.
Well, I mean, it could
like,
be, the God told him, don't do this, because he wanted to test him to try and, he told him not to do it because he wanted to try and test him to do it, which is seems to fit in with the character.
Petty double-crossing gaslighting bitch. Yeah,
If he
that's
didn't want to trick him into, and he wouldn't have told him don't eat there, and he would just be like, okay, you can.
I see Cogan writes that at least Josephus saw him as a rival. Let me just check the source real quick.
well, I mean, I don't really see him as a friend, so.
Yeah, it's only after he died and he saw the lion standing guard over the body was he like, wow, okay, I want my bones to mingle with his bones, like whatever.
Yeah, it's very indicative of this. It's actually kind of later developed in a funny way. So now, I believe, like, if the Catholic Church wants to canonize a saint, one of the indications that someone is a saint is that their body doesn't like decay or it's not destroyed or something like that afterwards. So like it obviously, like, that's a much later development of this idea of the body being preserved, and that being indicative of like some divine status.
It may not be that old. I mean, obviously the Catholic version is much newer.
Yeah,
but,
for canonizing. Yeah.
Yeah, but the idea of the body of the prophet having magic powers even after he's gone, because residual god radiation in the bones appears to be a vibe. Elisha, who we will get to, when somebody throws, like, running away from a raid or something, they have a body and the funeral is interrupted and they throw a body in there and he touches the bones and comes back to life. So that's definitely a vibe. I don't know. It's like, apparently having a dead prophet near you is fortuitous.
I mean,
Ew.
he also says a brother, right? So like, she just felt like a closeness to him, and maybe as a sign of repentance or something. I don't know. It's a weird story.
So
sorry.
God can be clear enough to say, "Don't eat that bread and water," but he cannot say something like, "Hey, by the way, if they try to trick you, don't pay attention. Just don't eat the bread and water."
I mean, he
Yeah,
already
he's a
said
man of
don't eat
God,
the
he should
bread
have
and
known.
water. So like, yeah. And so I found Josephus's claim in 8237 in Antiquities. He writes that he feared that this stranger might get ahead of him with the king and enjoy greater honor.
The king who
It's
he
interesting.
just cursed and refused to eat with. Sure, yeah, that's totally likely.
The Jewish traditional commentators like Rashi, whatever, that they seem to be. Some of them say, "Oh, he's just a false prophet."
Yeah.
Like it was part of like, that area's like a prophet to an idol or something, or a false prophet to Yahweh in the wrong way. But there's other opinions that say that he's possibly like Micah, or maybe not Micah, but a different one.
Not Micah.
with a
There
similar
are
name.
there are opinions. No,
Michaiah, something like that.
No. I mean, yes, it could be Micah, but also like, I have a comment on this. Some say it's
Okay.
Jonathan.
You said it.
I will get to that. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But I see a comment. Maybe I should read it.
Okay. let me see. Mojo says, Aaron, apparently there's someone here named Aaron. Is Jesus supposed to be the word of the Lord? Is the word of the Lord an entity or deity?
Oh boy, that's a
Is that a book title?
that's
I maintain it's a curse.
that's a very detailed theological question.
So maybe not. Maybe
It's-
Well, certainly not in the Old Testament.
no, definitely
It
not.
has multiple meanings depending on context and who intends it, and people can interchange them to serve their theological purposes. It can be an indwelling spirit that speaks to them through the scripture, which is the word of God, which is alive because blah blah blah. It can be Jesus. It can be. It's just it's a wild card, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when he
Is
gets to
there,
the
like-
New Testament, like the Gospel
I
of
was gonna
John.
say, is there like definitive proof that the New Testament has influence from like Plato or stuff like
Yeah, so
yeah, there's the philosophy is.
I'm gonna put a timer.
What?
I'm going
He's
to
gonna
put a
time
timer.
our-
If you're going
Okay.
to speak more than
Okay.
5 hours on irrelevant stuff, then I'm going to say I'm having.
Oh,
we're
5
off
hours.
topic.
We got time. Okay.
No, 5 hours. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Sorry. Or
The Mars Hill speech is a
I
total
wanted
ripoff
to
of
hear the
Socrates.
5-hour description.
No, it's not a
Yeah.
5 hour description. But yeah, there's certainly a lot of influence in Paul for what is it? From Stoicism, I think. There are definitely Platonic ideals throughout the New Testament. Absolutely, like they definitely pulled a lot from Greek philosophy.
the
Well,
logos of John in the Gospel
Yeah.
also presupposes Greek philosophy ideas going back to the pre-Socratics.
Yeah,
And you have to
Hello,
kind of like,
Alex.
some logos. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's very complicated.
And the Mars Hill speech that Paul gives is just a total ripoff of I totally did the thing that Socrates did, but I did it better. Except
Okay.
obviously that was written by the other author. Ugh. Paul's narcissism is a topic for another time.
Okay. So I'll start on verse 11. A certain old man, Josephus in Antiquities 8:236 calls him, quote, vile old man, a false prophet, whom Jeroboam held in honor, being deceived by his telling him what pleased him, end quote. And Targum reads, one old lying prophet. Kimchi notes that some Targum versions specify that this was Micah, which some of Chazal, in Talmud Yerushalmi Sanhedrin 11:5, claim that as well. Other rabbis
Wait,
on the same
the
tractate...
old man was Micah?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, like maybe he changed his ways and after the story maybe or something.
Yeah.
But I think Micah is much later, no? Well, it's
I
definitely
don't
written
know.
later, but it's
When does
Yeah.
it matter? There's no consistency in the
Yeah.
Bible.
was it early? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it just says it was Micah. Okay, so other rabbis on that same tractate identified the false prophet with Amaziah, the priest of Bethel, according to Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, or Jonathan, son of Gershom, according to Rabbi Yossi. Cogan, however, writes that these suggestions have no basis in scripture and are against the literary characteristic of the legend.
Mhm.
Who are those two characters? Who is Amaziah and Jonathan? Where are they meant? Where are they
I
mentioned?
think Amaziah was mentioned previously, no?
Oh, okay.
I don't remember.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. 'Cause he's supposed to be an old man, right? So
Yeah, he
Alright.
was during no, it was actually in Amos' time, I guess, if I remember correctly. Yeah, he fought against Amos, Amaziah, the priest of Bethel, and I think one of them slapped. No, that's a different story. No, there is
Prophets
a,
having bitch fights.
yeah, no, there is a story where one prophet slaps the other. I can't remember where exactly.
I believe it. I 100% believe it. I do.
Yeah.
I think I told you the story of like two rabbis celebrating like Passover together, and one like kills the other, and then in the morning he's like, "Oh shit," and like prays to have him bring him back to life. And then the next year he's like, "Oh, let's drink and celebrate the Passover together," and he's like, "Nope."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Whose sons came and told him. The Masoretic text reads, his son, Bno, came and told him. The verse later states, they told their father. Kimchi and Gersonides wrote that at first, one son of his told what the man of God did, and while he was speaking, the rest of his sons came and told to their father what the first one said. Most other translations read sons. DeVries writes that the text is either corrupt or simply confused in speaking first of a single son and then of several. On verse 18, he was lying to him. DeVries takes this phrase to be a late gloss, attempting to rationalize the Bethel prophet's words. Likewise, Cogan takes the phrase to be, quote, a circumstantial clause asymptotically attached, and looks like a footnote by the narrator for the reader. If the narrator wanted to express the old prophet's viewpoint, he would have written, and he lied to him, saying, compare Genesis 18:15. He writes, quote, the lie was not that he claimed to be a prophet, for he later does receive Yahweh's word in verse 20. It was rather the purported message.
Yeah, the whole, I saw an angel who totally told me you have to come have food.
Mm-hmm. And on verse 22, your body will not be buried in the tomb of your ancestors. Fritz comments, D.H. used this narrative connected with a grave in the vicinity of Bethel and reshaped it by making several additions. The center is now the ban by God on the return and the taking of food or drink. In his actions, the man of God ignored the ban of God, and he is punished for his lack of obedience when he is killed by a lion. The additions fundamentally change the intention of the narrative. Now, the story confirms the unconditional validity of the divine order. Its violation by the man of God is punished by death. The special behavior of the lion no longer proves the special status of the man of God, but simply demonstrates that it is according to the will of God. On verse 24, a lion met him on the road and killed him. Sweeney comments, the lion is the symbol of the tribe of Judah. Genesis 49:9 identifies Judah as the lion cub, in Hebrew, gur aryeh. The lion is a typical motif in the depiction of kings throughout the ancient Near East, and it is associated with David, who first appears as a shepherd boy who protects his flocks from lions, 1 Samuel 17:31-37. The name Ariel, Lion of God, is associated with Jerusalem, as we see in Isaiah 29:1, 2, and 7, as a designation for the hearth of the temple altar. The lion kills the man of God who betrayed his God, even if he was deceived, but it does not molest the ass or any passerby. Yes, that's
we don't
written
need
there.
a story where you molest the ass.
Yeah, I know. That's what he wrote.
I do love how the ass is
biblical
just
scale
freaking
jokes.
standing too. Like, that's totally realistic, of course. It's
Well,
not only
if you run away, they'll probably come after you. Stand your ground.
like, what kind of universe? It's like, oh yeah, the donkey's being ridden, the lion comes and grabs him off and kills him, and then they both just stand there for what, 3 hours while someone goes and
Because
finds
it's a
and comes back?
supernatural event. That's the point.
I know. It's just ridiculous.
Well, you're standing there, you're facing
Yeah,
down
he
a
kills
lion,
him, but he
you
doesn't.
turn your back on it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just very unlikely in real life to me. It's just...
Yeah, again,
Silly.
that's the point. Okay, so on 28, Sweeney writes that the image of the ass and the lion standing by the body of the man of God is an important element in the interpretation of the narrative. He writes, quote, these symbols reinforce the point that the northern kingdom, with its capital in Shechem and its sanctuary in Bethel, is a place of deception and lies. Jerusalem, Judah, and the house of David, by contrast, are identified with Yahweh, who will act against those corrupted by their association with Bethel and the north. On verse 30, he laid the body in his own tomb. Some traditionals, like Rashi and Kara, wrote that he buried him in the same graveyard, while others, like Kimchi and Abravanel, wrote that he buried him in his own grave. Fritz writes that this burial assumes a tradition of a burial of 2 prophetic figures in one grave at Bethel. He writes, quote, "This strange circumstance of the burial of two prophets in one grave is explained by the story of the strange death of the man of God by a lion on his way home to Judah. The center of the narrative is the surprising fact that the lion killed the man but did not eat him. This exceptional behavior of the animal is used to explain the special holiness of the man of God that leads to his burial in a foreign land and the special honor attached to his grave. The corpse possesses a special dignity because the lion has not touched it. The lion reveals the special status of the man of God, and so he is buried by the prophet in his own grave and lamented by him. Since the prophet decreed that his own burial be in the same grave, this grave shown near Bethel, that contained two holy men from the north and south, became a symbol for the community of the prophets of Israel and Judah."
Now, am I just expecting too much that when you're a prophet, you talk to God, that maybe he will tell you when some other guy is lying to you?
Maybe he had to ask. God does like to make people grovel for information. Or maybe he should have just, the rule is, and this is definitely a lesson I was told was the point of many Bible stories, to just shut up and do what you're told and don't think once you've got the instructions.
Yeah, I was given that one too.
So God let the lion kill the man or tear him apart, but he didn't let him eat him. So that's fine. That makes it okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like he killed him but didn't tear him apart. It was like he just killed him like one blow, let's say, and then left the body there and just stood there.
What is the poor lion is hungry?
I don't know. It could be a case of Elijah that he ate something and then it stayed on his body for like longer. We'll get to that. Okay, on 31 and 32, Sweeney comments, "The narrative concludes with the portrayal of the burial of the Judean man of God by the old prophet of Bethel and in instructions to his sons that his bones should also be placed in the tomb after he dies. This notice establishes the etiology of the tomb that Josiah observes in 2 Kings 23, 15 through 20. It notes that the initial prophetic word directed against the altar by the Judean man of God will ultimately be fulfilled, both against the Bethel altar and the high places established throughout Samaria. The concluding reference to Samaria indicates the late date of this story, given that Samaria is not established as the capital of northern Israel until the reign of Omri in 1624. And finally, 33 and 34, Cogan comments, "The Deuteronomistic element in 1 Kings 13 appear in the frame verses 12:33 and 13:33 and 13:33 and 34, and in the ex eventum Josianic references in verses 2 and 32b. The editor underscores the image of Jeroboam as an unrepentant sinner. The matter of the prophetic prediction against the altar and the temporary punishment that he himself experiences in verses 1 through 6 make no impression on this arch heretic. Even the conversion of the old prophet from Bethel, who acknowledges the truth of the warning pronounced against the altar, goes unheeded. An epilogue to the tale of the man of God from Judah, also Deuteronomistic in composition, has been inserted into the history of Josiah in 2 Kings 23, verses 15 through 20. It is the concluding act of the drama that took place at Bethel on the day of the altar's inauguration, complementing and accentuating the lesson of 1 Kings 13. The word of Yahweh is trustworthy."
Yeah, the word of Yahweh is trustworthy. So when somebody tells you that they're hearing the word of Yahweh, you know it's trustworthy. Even when they just told you that God said, "Yeah, it's okay. You can go ahead and eat bread at my house."
Mm-hmm. Perhaps it's to quote Hitchens, I'm sorry, if you're on the bus and the man next to you says he's hearing the voice of God, do you move closer or farther away?
Well, I'm getting a vibe of somebody saying, "Your mommy told me I should come pick you up and take you home to her."
Mm-hmm.
And what is the point if on verse 33, it didn't help out. Jeroboam kept on doing the same thing. So what was the whole point of killing this one man of God? So that we read it
Uh,
today
Just
and
to
be like,
big up
oh,
Messiah.
it's just basically the argument always seems to be God's going to do horrible things to you, but he warned you, so it's not his fault.
Yeah, like he warned all of the people who died in the flood.
Yeah, totally. Well, and
Oh, and
that's the other thing is there's always these magical stories of these tremendous things that happened, huge, dramatic, supernatural, and yet somehow it didn't affect the behavior of anyone who apparently witnessed it, which is of course because they're all evil and not because the story is bullshit.
Before we get to the comments, I have one Christian, who is Ephraim, who writes that when the old prophet insists in saying that he wants to be buried in the grave of the prophet, he foreshadows baptism, which is the grave of the Emmanuel.
Yeah.
The Emmanuel, like that one.
The Emmanuel, yes.
Why don't they just say
Yeah,
whatever just happened foreshadows Jesus somehow?
That's
If
it.
you read-
It's
That is it. That's exactly it. Yeah.
yeah. Have you
If
ever
you
been
read-
baptized?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember it? Like, because they say you are buried with Christ, you die with Christ, or are buried with him and rise again, and that's what they say. Those are the magic words.
Yeah, well, mine was an accidental baptism. I stepped on a slippery rock, fell over backwards, yelled Jesus Christ as I fell.
I don't want to know what happens.
That's why it didn't
I don't want to
take.
know what happens to your IKEA furniture if you use an Emmanuel. But, yeah.
Oh.
Okay, Matt White says, Aaron,
The
false
Nisa.
prophet, oxymoron, or tautology? I'm going to go
Yes.
with the latter. Yeah. And then Nauhart says, speaking of logos, my former pastor told me that the word use of logos was to appeal to the Greeks. Is that true?
I mean,
Well,
the
they would
whole
have
Greek
definitely-
Testament is.
They would have definitely understood it, because of what Mark and I were just talking about. That they already had this idea of a pre-existent logos.
Yeah, and I think John is just saying, oh, that logos thing you guys talk about, that's Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The idea of the logos came from Philos of Alexandria. I mean, the term was used first by Kemal, building on existing ideas at the time. And the author of the fourth gospel was frickin' Greek. So he was just referencing that idea. And totally, yeah, absolutely. Oh, hey, you know that philosophical idea? It's just Jesus. It's just Jesus. Everything is just Jesus.
And then Eric86 says, why would a God need prophets anyway? If a God has something to say, why not just talk to the people directly? Because that's only what real characters do.
Maybe this is like a Sims game that got abandoned a long time ago, but at one point he was like, focused on one little area, and he was kind of, making them do the things and talk to each other. So, it's like a kid with their Barbie dolls.
Yeah,
the kid
I'm
is
just
really
saying
fucked
in
up.
any real world situation, you're receiving. Let's say you've got the CIA earpiece, the little wire that goes in your ear. So you're believably receiving messages from higher up, but nobody else can hear it. And you're telling everybody to do all of these things, and all of the things that you're telling them to do are costly to them and rewarding to you. So everything they do grants you and you alone special privilege and pleasure and riches and all of that. And all they have is your word that you're receiving these messages from the president or the general or whoever. In a real world application, would anybody believe you?
Unfortunately, I have to say yes. The last several years have proven that people will believe any fucking con, no matter what it costs them, if it appeals to their ego.
Yeah, well, that's disappointing.
It is.
I think there is some sort of. I think there, in the context of the Bible, there is some sort of implication that, like, you know, the reason why God speaks to these people and not to others is that they kind of take it upon themselves to be this to be a prophet, and maybe it has something to do with like ritual purity, like they keep very pure and they practice certain things, and that's why even a prophet or a different prophet, since they're keeping the same practices, they're still like pure enough for God to like inhabit and speak to.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
God.
Yeah.
Aw. Look at the
Yeah.
pretty fluffy orange in there.
Yeah, I
Alright.
think we should continue.
Okay, are we ready for 14?
Yes.
All right.
And read up through 20.
Okay. At that time, Abijah, son of Jeroboam, fell sick. Jeroboam said to his wife, "Go, disguise yourself, so that it will not be known that you are the wife of Jeroboam, and go to Shiloh. For the prophet Elijah or Ahijah is there, who said of me that I should be king over this people. Take with you 10 loaves, some cakes, and a jar of honey, and go to him. He will tell you what shall happen to the child." Jeroboam's wife did so. She set out and went to Shiloh and came to the house of Ahijah. Now, Ahijah could not see, for his eyes were dim because of his age. But the Lord said to Ahijah, "The wife of Jeroboam is coming to inquire of you concerning her son, for he is sick. Thus and thus you shall say to her when she comes, she will pretend to be another woman." But when Ahijah heard the sound of her feet as she came to the door, he said, "Come in, wife of Jeroboam. Why do you pretend to be another? For I am charged with heavy tidings for you. Go, tell Jeroboam, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, because I exalted you from among the people, made you leader over my people Israel, and tore the kingdom away from the house of David to give it to you. Yet you have not been like my servant David, who kept my commandments and followed me with all his heart, doing only that which was right in my sight. But you have done evil above all those who were before you, and have gone and made yourself other gods and cast images, provoking me to anger, and have thrust me behind your back. Therefore, I will bring evil upon the house of Jeroboam. I will cut off from Jeroboam every male, both bond and free, in Israel, and I will consume the house of Jeroboam, just as one burns up dung until it is gone. Anyone belonging to Jeroboam who dies in the city, the dogs shall eat, and anyone who dies in the open country, the birds of the air shall eat, for the Lord has spoken. Therefore, set out, go to your house. When your feet enter the city, the child shall die. All Israel shall mourn for him and bury him, for he alone of Jeroboam's family shall come to the grave, because in him there is found something pleasing to the Lord, the God of Israel, in the house of Jeroboam. Moreover, the Lord will raise up for himself a king over Israel, who shall cut off the house of Jeroboam today, even right now. How far did you want me to go, Tommy?
20.
20. Okay. The Lord will strike Israel as a reed is shaken in the water. He will root up Israel out of this good land that he gave to their ancestors and scatter them beyond the Euphrates, because they have made their sacred poles, provoking the Lord to anger. He will give Israel up because of the signs of Jeroboam, which he sinned and which he caused Israel to commit. Then Jeroboam's wife got up and went away, and she came to Tirzah. As she came to the threshold of the house, the child died. All Israel buried him and mourned for him, according to the word of the Lord that he spoke by his servant, the prophet Ahijah. Now, the rest of the acts of Jeroboam, how he warred, and how he reigned, are written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel. The time that Jeroboam reigned was 22 years, Then he slept with his ancestors, and his son Nadab succeeded him.
So I like you, I'll kill you first.
Yeah, yep. David did everything I asked and was committed to me with his whole heart. So I took his kingdom away.
And you, you didn't murder nearly as many people as David did, which pisses me off. And you worshipped someone else, which pisses me off more. So I'm going to kill the only kid you have that has any good in him. And then I'm just going to slaughter your family for
Well,
kicks
that's all
for
he
the
could
next
do. Those other people put up poles, and that, of course, reminds Yahweh of his ex-wife.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Those would be Asherah poles, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which, as
You
I
wanna
understand,
remind the
some of
audience
those.
what an Asherah pole is, or who Asherah is?
Oh yeah, so Asherah was so initially she would have been the divine consort of El, but as Yahweh started to gain some traction in that part of the world, essentially there is another case here of divine cannibalism in which one god eats up and consumes the attributes of the surrounding gods.
including his wife, which was formerly his mother of the new god, at least in some cases.
Not
Not
quite. But
not with
Yahweh
Yahweh
can't
specifically.
be found among any of the ancient Canaanite literature. But there's like one obscure reference, and it's probably a misreading.
Yeah,
So
fair enough.
the thing is, in I think it's from the 8th century? Is that when the inscription at Kutlet Adrud was found, or sorry, when it was from?
Which one?
Where the inscription says, blessings to Yahweh and his Asherah, and it's literally a picture of Yahweh and his divine consort
And his
Asherah.
Asherah. And then
Yeah,
and then
and
they
one-
broke up, and he got really petty and burned everything.
Well,
Yeah,
I've
one of the
seen
first
worse.
papers or
Look at
something
Johnny
has.
Depp.
I don't know. I
I think one.
mean, it's
I think one of the first papers of that image, but accidentally included a copy of the image or a tracing where both figures have phalluses.
Oh, I thought this was
And
going
it
to
was
be
a
about
mistake.
Lawrence's with God's titties.
Well, if they both had phalluses, it makes more sense why the worship object is a pole.
Well, one of the things, and now this is not native to this text, but I think that if we read
No,
some
it
of
was a
the
mistake.
Canaanite or like the Ugaritic literature on this, on Asherah poles and Baal, like much of this was
That's
used.
dark, eh?
Where I think one of the motives for these Asherah poles was to actually cause Baal, or whatever fertility god was the head of all that, to become aroused sexually in order to fertilize the clouds and bring about the rain and all the benefits of being blessed by the God who runs agriculture. And so it's interesting to see that the effect of the Asherah pole now in this text here is not that it's provoking sexual arousal, but anger that leads to
Well,
killings.
but anger and sexual arousal being intertwined is very much like we see the effects of that being a knock on today with the kind of toxic Christian patriarchy vibe that you get. And it's, frankly, I just think no one ever pegged Yahweh as well as Asherah. And so he's bitter about it. And
Yeah, they didn't peg both of them. They only pegged one of them.
Oh God. But yeah, it's there's a lot of bitter, vindictive anger towards the divine feminine there that has been a part of it. It was, I think, perhaps not the primary goal of the move to monotheism and through henotheism to the I'm the biggest and best and most important. That was just a byproduct of it, but it's a very lasting and destructive one.
Yeah, I don't. I wouldn't think
that
that's necessarily any attack on specifically the divine feminine, because they do later have wisdom, in Proverbs 8, right? So like,
Yeah, and
still, like,
I think that wasn't the primary goal, and there may
Yeah,
have been some
yeah,
people
it's not
trying to push
primary.
against it, as you get the good Christians nowadays trying to be like, but Jesus said love, and ignoring all the bad shit. They're trying, but
Yeah, Jesus said, "Bring me my enemies
It,
and slaughter them in front of me."
But don't we all say that?
I know I do.
absolutely. Lipstick, that's what I
It-
need, is lipstick the color of the blood of mine enemies.
is the idea that Asherah poles were trees a later idea that was kind of invented by
I think.
like biblical scholars or something?
It's hard
I
to
think.
tell.
Like-
I mean, having
I'm not
worship
sure.
around, an iconic tree that is very tall and old at a high mountain place, that sort of would feel very natural and something that might have grown.
Well, I don't know.
There
Like,
is
you could
something
have
called
like
the terebinth that's mentioned a lot.
you could have like
There
a
you go.
sacred grove or something, or I mean, I don't know. People put up
It's wrong.
stones, like standing stones, as worship sites. So like, it's not a shocker that they either like planted a tree or like just put up a pole somewhere. Like that. I don't know. It's all seems to be in the same category of normal things that people worship.
Mhm.
It's all very phallic.
Yeah, I mean, a very impressive tree, can be a sign or was taken a sign of
sequoia,
fertility or
redwood,
something like
very impressive trees.
that. Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll start on verse 1.
Mm.
Sweeney comments, the timing of this episode is crucial within the Masoretic text framework because it points to Jeroboam's culpability in establishing the worship of the golden calves at Dan and Bethel as the basis cause for his dynasty's downfall. It is also crucial because Achia's prior oracle in 11:29 through 39 made it clear that Yahweh's promise of kingship to Jeroboam depended entirely on Jeroboam's compliance with Yahweh's commands, especially the prohibition against other gods. The identity of Jeroboam's sons as Abiah and Nadab in 1525 is noteworthy. Aaron's sons, Abihu and Nadab, accompanied Aaron, Moses, and the 70 elders to dine in the presence of Yahweh at Mount Sinai in Exodus 24:1 and 9 through 11, but they were later consumed for offering unholy fire in Leviticus 10:1 and 2. Insofar as Aaron allowed the golden calf to be built at Sinai, Exodus 32 depicts Aaron and his sons at Sinai in terms similar to Jeroboam and his sons. On verse 2, Cogan comments, Jeroboam's request that his wife will disguise as a simple woman hints to a rift between the king and the prophet. Jeroboam probably thought that if Achia didn't know that the speaker was the king's wife, he'll probably get a prophecy that is not influenced by the prophet's negative attitude towards him. Of course, this scheme didn't work. Jeroboam's words are puzzling. On the one hand, he thought that Achia was a true prophet, since he knew that Jeroboam would rule over Israel. But at the same time, he believed that he could outwit him and not recognize the woman as his wife. As Ehrlich writes, quote, for it is the heart's inclination to believe in what he wants and to exaggerate in what he does not want, end quote. Scripture doesn't give a reason to the rift between the king and the prophet. It can be assumed that Achia, who was a Shilonite, was disappointed when Jeroboam preferred Bethel and Dan as royal temple cities over Shiloh, which was an important cultic center in pre-monarchic period. On verse
I just have to say, the wife, her behavior is really weird. Like, if this was anything written by the Greeks and she was told the day you step foot back in your house, your child will die, she would just not go home. She'd send a message to the king, I can't go home or the kid will die. Prophet saw through. I'm going to go live in the hills now. Peace.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she's a woman. She has no free will.
Unless, someone get me a tent peg.
Okay, on 3 through 6, Fritz comments, the mother's mission is to clarify the fate of the son. This seems to imply a long-term illness. That she takes food for Achia shows that such a gift was common. The disguise of the otherwise anonymous queen would make her look like any common woman, so that the inquiry will be free from any bias. The additional verse 5 stresses that Achia receives his knowledge from God. Despite his blindness, Achia recognizes the wife of Jeroboam because of his visionary ability, and he stresses the futility of her disguise, which cannot fully profit, in verse 6. Although the motifs of disguise and blindness are mutually exclusive, they are used here to enforce the reliability of the divine message.
I mean, another possible reason why he wanted his wife to be disguised so that the people wouldn't see that he's sending his wife to speak to a prophet that he doesn't listen to.
That's actually a good point. When the rich and powerful piss the people off enough, they tend to walk around in disguise or hide in bunkers because someone dressed in a costume.
Yeah.
Or they create a sock account on their own social media channel.
I mean, Kim Gassanidis wrote that he did this because he knew Achia hated him. So he said in his heart,
I know, but
if he knew
if
that
he's
Achia
blind,
was
like,
not,
yeah.
Yeah.
And admittedly, I suppose having enough courtiers around her might be a bit of a giveaway, so it's safer for her to travel just disguised. But yeah, he's still blind.
Yeah. Now on 7 through 9, DeVries comments, DH has Achia repeat the language of Jeroboam's appointment from original material at 1134. As there, the term prince, Nasi, here Nagid, seems to imply the pre-dynastic element of divine appointment, as we see in 1 Samuel 10:1 and 2 Samuel 5:2. Although the Achia story of chapter 11 had not made emulation of David's obedience a condition, this appears only in DH material in verses 38 and 39, DH here makes Jeroboam's failure to keep this condition the reason for his condemnation. In verse 9, DH goes a bit overboard in comparing Jeroboam with his predecessors, since David has to be included in the comparison, and he had not done any evil at all. On verse 10, every last male. In Hebrew, it's mashtin bakil, literally pisser against the wall. This, yeah, we've seen that already. We've seen that term already.
Yeah.
This meaning is preserved by Vulgate and Peshitta, but Targum reads, whoever knows knowledge, and Rashi explains, he who places knowledge into the walls of his heart. Kimchi, based on Midrash Shmuel 23:11, wrote that this refers to a dog who urinates on walls, and it is said by way of exaggeration, i.e., the prophet is prophesying about a terrible destruction, that even a dog will not be left when the house of Jeroboam be destroyed. Sweeney notes that the term also appears to be a characteristic phrase of the Jehu history, or Yehu, in 16:11, 21:21, and 2 Kings 9:8, and suggests an element of contempt for the house of Jeroboam. Cogan, however, writes that it is not possible to know if this was perceived as such in the ancient world.
Was it Pastor Anderson, the crazy homophobic ranting lunatic, who had that whole sermon about how the term means pisseth against the wall, and like raved at Europeans because they sometimes sit down to pee, and how it was, I don't know, he went totally off the rails. It was the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, I mean, there's like, I don't know, Tom, did you mention it maybe last time? It could.
Oh, Isaac, you're glitching.
Yeah.
Dogs won't piss on the walls of this building.
Isaac, you glitched.
Okay, whatever.
No.
Something about dogs not pissing on the walls of the building or something. I don't know.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Okay.
I just need to run for 2 minutes to light the menorah, and then I'll be back.
Yeah, sure. I get where it's coming from. Yeah. Okay. On slave or free. In Hebrew, it's atzur ve'azuv. The exact meaning of this phrase is unclear. The most common interpretation, given by Vulgate, Targum, Rashi, and Kara, is that atzur refers to a slave and azuv refers to a free man. Sweeney writes that this term refers to those who have become slaves to repay a debt. as we see in Exodus 21, 1 through 11, Deuteronomy 15, 12 through 18, 32 and 36, and 1 Kings 21, 21, etc. He writes that the term in 1 Kings 21, 21 and 2 Kings 9, 8 refers to the totality of the house of Omri, and in 2 Kings 14, 26 refers to the destitute state of the people of Israel. DeVries renders helpless and abandoned and writes that it is, quote, an alliterative phrase of utter loathing.
Alliterative.
Mhm.
I do love when my insults are alliterative.
Now, as one burns dung until it is all gone. Hebrew for dung is galal. This meaning is found in Vulgate and traditional commentators like Rashi, Kara, and Ibn Kaspi. Kimchi and Gersonides, based on Talmud Bava Kama 2b, wrote that galal refers to the tooth, i.e., the tooth will consume the food completely. The root gimel lamed lamed means to roll into a ball. Cogan notes that dung was used as fuel, according to Ezekiel 4:12. Other readings include, I will glean the house of Jeroboam as the vines in the vineyard are gleaned when gleaning over, according to Peshitta, as they roll down with threshing rollers until they finish, according to Targum, and until the wind blows over the rolling hay, according to Botseko. On verse 11, the same reading is found in 16:4 regarding Ba'asha, and in 21:24 regarding Achab. A similar punishment for all those who transgress the commandment of God is found in Deuteronomy 28:26. Cogan writes that Achia regards Jeroboam as the one who broke the oath with Yahweh that he promised to keep in 1138. Such language is found in other ancient Near Eastern texts like the vassal treatise of Esarhaddon. On verse 13, Fritz comments, the further prophecy in verse 13a alpha is difficult to understand. The burial with its rites of mourning will be a public rather than a private affair. The rites of mourning express the pain of the loss of a person and consist of lamentation, tearing garments, putting ash on the head, and wearing special clothes. The extent of the dirge can only show the extraordinary loss. A royal son is always a person on whom hopes have been pinned, and the participation of all of Israel in the mourning demonstrates the dimension of this untimely death that concerns the state as a whole. The narrative assumes an untroubled relationship between the royal household and the people. On verse 14, even now this is beginning to happen. In Hebrew, Ze hayom v'me gam ata. The exact meaning of this phrase is unclear, with DeVries calling it a severely garbled line, quote unquote. Ze hayom is usually taken to mean this day or this today. The phrase ma gam ata is more difficult. Targum renders whoever is alive this day and also who will be born from then and forward, as if it reads from now on, v'me'ata. Also Rashi, Gersonides, Ibn Kaspi, and Botseko. Vulgate reads, in this day and in this time. Peshitta renders, from today and what will follow. Sweeney renders, this day even now, and Fritz, today even right now. On verse 15 and 16, Fritz comments, the addition of verses 15 and 16 foresees the downfall of the state following the Assyrian conquest and the deportation of the upper classes after the fall of Samaria. The fate of the northern kingdom is linked to the sin of Jeroboam manifested in idolatry. The sacred poles or Asherahs mentioned were wooden poles representing the goddess Asherah, who appears in Canaanite mythology not only as the consort of the fertility god Baal, but also as a guarantor and maintainer of fertility herself. The Asherahs were thus a visible sign of the widespread fertility cult that stood in opposition to the universal claim of Yahweh as the Lord of life. And finally, on verse 19, the Book of the Annals of the Kings of Israel. We also have the parallel Book of the Annals of the Kings of Judah. Cogan notes Mowinkle's opinion that these two titles represent one book written in Judah. where there was interest in the history of the Kingdom of Israel, but he writes that this opinion is not widely accepted amongst scholars. He writes that we find no examples in the historical literature of the ancient Near East to such annals. He writes, quote, although such annals were compared to the Babylonian Chronicles, and it was even proposed that the Israelite texts were influenced by, quote, the exilic climate of Babylonian culture, end quote, according to Long, it should be noted that although the rise of chronicle writing in Babylon began during the second half of the 8th century BCE, such writing was already known in other areas, as indicated by the synchronistic history, quote-unquote, an Assyrian text dated to the beginning of the 8th century. There is no reason to limit such writing in Israel to the period of Babylonian rule at the end of the First Temple period, as Van Setters proposed. Records of expeditions, wars, changes of governments, and political affairs, the main subjects in the Babylonian Chronicles, were done in all ancient Near Eastern kingdoms. The Israelite Chronicles represent a wide variety of subjects, and it seems that the authors gathered information from official reports from the king's court, the temple, and outside of them to write one-of-a-kind literary texts. End quote. Fritz, however, takes the reference to such annals as fictitious, and that it was used to fake extensive source material for the depiction of the period of the monarchy. He writes, quote, such a vorlage for the work of the age never existed, but he was nevertheless able to use narratives and notices that were already fixed in written form. The extent and content of this pre-Deuteronomistic tradition can no longer be determined. All in all, we can assume that DH was confronted with scarce source material rather than a plethora of it. In view of the scarcity of his depiction, one cannot assume that DH had access to concrete historical reports that he did not use or incorporate. That's it.
Yeah,
I
that makes
realize
sense.
I'm not actually on the screen. It's okay. I'm just a disembodied voice now.
Yeah.
All right, so I've got a couple comments here. Now Hart, who offers 100 Swedish kroner, says, as a trans woman who will never come out due to fear, I found out about a poem from a Jewish trans woman during the 1300s, I think. Have you read it?
Yeah, this
I've
refers
heard
to
of it.
Kalonimos. This refers to Kalonimos ben Kalonimos, and there is a one of his passages in his writing called Evan Bochan. The speaker in it just cries that he is a man, and he describes all the benefits about women lives. But while there are scholars who say that this is like gender dysphoria, others see it as like something humoristic. Some see it as like criticism of the social life during that time before women, criticism of the social life. No, sorry, I can't speak. Criticism of society towards women. That's what I wanted to say. Yeah.
So it's a
I
case
mean-
of this might have been a trans woman, or it might have been a man making observations about the treatment of women.
Yeah.
But either way, being perceived as a man would give them a better chance
Yeah.
to be heard.
Yeah.
Also, I like
Fair
the way
enough.
you say the name.
Cut-
I always
what?
remember. I always remember it as Clonimus, son of Clonimus. But yeah.
I mean, it is Kalonimus. I mean, it's a cup.
Yeah, I know, and that's how you would read it. But I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean,
Got
I'm
another
not a trans woman. I can't speak to what that dysphoria feels like, but it sounds like it would be worth looking at.
I wonder if anybody in that time period would have even been able to put together that if that's really what they felt, would they even be able to internalize it? Because there wasn't any dialogue, there was no terminology for this.
Yeah, I think that saying that he was trans is dubious, to say the least. I don't
Yeah.
think we can really determine if he was trans or not. So
Yeah.
I know a
We
bunch
got a
of
comment from
bunch of,
Nuzzy D.
male.
Hmm?
Yeah, whatever.
Sorry, Isaac.
I'm
go
saying a
ahead.
bunch of male scholars think it probably wasn't. It was not that strong of an argument.
Nuzzy
point.
D says $4.99. Thank you very much. It says, it's not lying when you're lying for God, and it's not hate when you hate the same people my God hates. Don't stop, Aaron Ra. Thank you very much for that. All right, so am I going to pick up here from 21?
Yes, please.
Okay. Now, Rehoboam, son of Solomon, reigned in Judah. Rehoboam was 41 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city that the Lord had chosen out of all the tribes of Israel to put his name there. His mother's name was Nehemiah the Ammonite. And Judah did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. They provoked him to jealousy with their sins that they committed, more than all of their ancestors had done. For they also built for themselves high places, pillars, and sacred poles on every hill and under every green tree. There were also illicit priests in the land. They committed all of the abominations of the nations that the Lord had driven out before the people of Israel. In the 5th year of King Rehoboam, King Shishak of Egypt came up against Jerusalem. He took away the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's house. He took everything, even the roast beast. He also took away all the shields of gold that Solomon had made. So King Rehoboam made shields of bronze instead and committed them to the hands of the officers of the guard who kept the door of the king's house. As often as the king went into the house of the Lord, the guard carried them and brought them back into the guard room. Now, the rest of the acts of Rehoboam and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? Well, actually, we don't know, do we? I don't think we have those books anymore. There was war between Rehoboam and Jeroboam continually. Rehoboam slept with his ancestors and was buried with his ancestors in the city of David. His mother's name was Nehemiah the Ammonite. His son Abijam succeeded him.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's the end of the.
Yeah, and
The
all of
word of
this
the
tells
Lord.
me that this is not the word of God. This is not the word of somebody who created the universe. This is not the one message for God to bring to all mankind for all time. No. This is completely
No.
provincial.
But this is the first. I would say this is the first. What's the word? Story or what's the word for it? Like the first like section that has a beginning, end, and middle, whatever that is probably actually happened and actually true.
At least partially
the-
relates to real people. Yeah.
Yeah, so this King Shishak, this Pharaoh Nishak King Shishak that's mentioned here, is almost definitely, virtually all scholars agree that this is Shoshank, who I think he was a fifth, not sure exactly which, Shoshank the First, from the founder of the 22nd dynasty, and there is an inscription that says that he did a campaign into Canaan around the time, which would have been the 5th year for Rehoboam. Yeah.
Okay, so we're starting to get into some
Karnak
real
inscription.
history there.
Well,
All
one
right.
thing on verse 24, I think I heard Aaron's translation say something like illicit priests. I think if we look at the Hebrew, there's a word in there, kadesh, which is, I think, better
Yes.
translated as a cult prostitute, like a
Temple prostitute.
a
Yeah, that's what I
ritual,
was
yeah.
referencing
Yeah.
earlier when I said like conservatives would say something like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's the masculine version of the word kadesha, which could also refer to a prostitute. Although the root of the word means holy, so it's the idea is it's possibly referring to some sort of temple prostitution. Male and
goody.
female versions. Yeah.
And that's kind of like what I referenced to earlier, that they would have these rituals in order to sexually arouse the gods, the fertility gods, to get them to do stuff.
Yeah, makes sense.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's also possible that the word, using the word holy to refer to a prostitute just refers to them being separated. The word holy can mean like it's a separate place you have to go to. Someone who is holy is
So like
So
it.
lost
a
him again.
prostitute is separate as well in that sense.
Okay, yeah. Well, and
Oh,
You're referencing Kodesh. It has the same 3-letter root word, right? But it's a little different, no?
Oh, Isaac?
Did we lose Isaac?
I don't know.
I don't know if he's frozen or just no, he's frozen. Okay. Isaac has been he looked at Medusa and has been turned into a golem.
try moving.
I don't know if I should continue the
So
commentary.
we're we ready for 15 now?
No, I have commentary.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, so I'll start on verse 21. Jerusalem, the city the Lord had chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, in which, etc. Sweeney writes that the reference to Jerusalem as the city where Rehoboam ruled, quote, employs typical DH language to emphasize Yahweh's choice of the city as the place where the divine name would be manifested and Yahweh's promise of eternal kingship to David in 1132 and 2 Samuel 7, end quote. Likewise, DeVries writes that DH, quote, shows us clearly in this instance that he is the author by throwing in his honorific descriptions of that city, end quote. On that same verse, his mother's name was Naamah, she was an Ammonite. According to the Septuagint in 1224a, she was the daughter of Hanun, son of Nachash, king of Ammon. Kimchi and Gersonides wrote that the passage informs us that he walked after his mother and worshipped idols after 3 years, according to 2 Chronicles 11:17. DeVries writes that Naamah is mentioned because she automatically became queen mother. That she was an Ammonite is no surprise in view of Solomon's practice of marrying foreign women. Cogan writes that this information has nothing to do with the criticism towards the Ammonite women that Solomon married in 11:1. He notes Malamat's opinion that Solomon's marriage to Naamah were diplomatic. And Fritz comments, quote, the queen mother, impartially called an Ammonite here, occupied an important place in the Davidic dynasty. In contrast to the wives of the king, she occupied a special position, which is also emphasized by the title mistress in 1513, 2 Kings 10:13, and Jeremiah 13:18. The office was probably connected with special rights and duties that are not known. In any case, she had to be present during official royal functions, and their person guaranteed the dynastic succession. The office is also known from neighboring cultures and was probably taken over from them, together with the main elements of the royal protocol for the court in Jerusalem, end quote.
Yeah, that sounds right.
On verse 22, Judah did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Sweeney comments, the theological assessment of Rehoboam's reign employs stereotypical language that ties his actions to the portrayal of Israel's sins in the days of the judges and the other monarchs of Judah and Israel. The statement, and Judah did evil in the eyes of Yahweh, represents the typical assessment of all the kings of Israel, as well as the kings of Judah judged to be evil in Kings. The statement is unique, however, in that Judah, rather than one of the kings, is the subject of the statement. The following statement concerning Judah's provoking Yahweh more than their ancestors can hardly be read in relation to the kings of Israel or Judah, since Rehoboam is only the third monarch of the Davidic line. It therefore points to earlier usage of the expression to do evil in the eyes of Yahweh in Deuteronomy and the Deuteronomistic historian.
Does it count as a dynasty if it lasts less than the Eden's wealth? Like,
Kinda. I mean, dynasty is a lineage, right?
I know. I'm just saying, if you rule for less than 3 generations, you're really going to call that a dynasty? I guess they did. Everybody had to be very grand.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so on 24, male shrine prostitutes. In Hebrew, it's kedashim, or kadashim. The Kadeshim are explicitly prohibited in Deuteronomy 20.
It just says
sorry.
Kadesh.
Yeah,
Sorry,
but I'm
it
saying
just-
it's Kadesh, but I'm using the plural.
Plural.
Yeah. But the singular implies the plural, yes. The Kadesh are explicitly prohibited in Deuteronomy 23:18. The usual interpretation is that these were prostitutes, according to Targum and traditionals, or as part of a sacred prostitution rite, according to DeVries and Sweeney. Fritz, however, writes that there are no signs of sexual acts committed at cultic places in Israel. He writes that one should think of, quote, the segregation of certain people for a deity, end quote, which would contradict the common thought of a life fulfilled by producing offspring. Likewise, Cogan writes that there is no evidence that such a sacred prostitution has existed in Israel, Canaan, or in the ancient Near East. He writes that the mention of Kedeshah and Kadesh is in adjacent with Atenan Zonah, the fee of a whore, in Deuteronomy 23:18 and 19, quote, for both are abhorrent to the Lord your God, end quote, tarnishes the work of these idol worshippers, but it is not evidence for cultic prostitution.
It could have been a
Doing an awful lot
vilification
of
of
talking about prostitution for not having any prostitution, or is that the complaint?
Well, God does like to call, if the relationship between God and, either Israel or the Christian church, depending on your flavor, has been compared to a marriage. And God does like to call his spouse a whore a lot, like every good abusive partner. So,
You're telling me
how
that
much-
God wears a tank top?
yeah.
Okay.
And drinks really shitty beer and yells a lot.
Mm-hmm. Okay, on 25, Shishak, king of Egypt, also called Shoshak in Ketiv. Rashi and Kara, based on Canticles Rabat 7:7, wrote that this was Pharaoh Necho, and he was called Shishak because all his life he longed for, Shokek, the ivory throne that belonged to Solomon, his son-in-law, and now he went up and took it.
Yeah,
Modern
the ivory, like the massive throne and everything. What I said the story about, I think it was last week.
With the lions
Yeah,
and the
so it was
magic.
so it was Shishak who, in the tradition, he was the first. He stole it at this point in the story, and then it ended up in Assyria and then Persia. Yeah, but so the pharaoh Necho that's mentioned in the Bible is probably Necho II, and that would have been like a long time later. I think he's mentioned only in let's see, Necho II. Yeah, he's like in like the 6th century, mentioned by Ashurbanipal. Well, not by Ashurbanipal, but it's probably in part of the library. He's mentioned in some of the books, and he's mentioned like 2 kings, Jeremiah. So it's the chances this king now being the same as that character is very low. Although he is called Necho II, so maybe there is another Necho that's not mentioned in the Bible that this commentator is trying to say that Shishak is the same guy, but it doesn't. Yeah, there's no chance.
That's one of the good things about repeating names in dynasties is you can take credit for all of your ancestors' deeds.
Yeah, but it's definitely not the same. Yeah, to claim that the Necho, the Pharaoh Necho that's mentioned in the Bible, is the same as Pharaoh, this king Shishak, doesn't make any sense. They're like 200-300 years apart, something like that.
So where was it?
Wait, sorry, I must have missed it. Who said that Nico was the same as Shishak?
Rashi and Kara, based on Canticles Rabbah 7:7.
Okay, that's awful. Yeah,
It's rabbinical sources. Like neither of these people knew
hundreds of years apart.
The characters. Neither of them knew that these were real historical characters. No. Like they thought they were. They assumed they were historical because the Bible says they are.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Tomer, just for my own learning, who was the scholar that you cited, or the scholars that denied that there was temple prostitution happening in ancient Israel or ancient Canaan?
Fritz and Cogan.
Yeah, okay. That's worth looking at, because that sounds like bullshit. I mean,
Yeah.
that whole area, everybody fucking as a religious rite, at least for certain gods or things, fertility gods, gods of harvest and stuff. I mean, Pharaoh had to jack off into the Nile to emblematically seed the land with the flood every year. That was not weird. I mean, it was weird, but it wasn't weird for that area in time.
It's very possible that
Mhm.
the word Kadesh should just refer to like, temple retainers, male and female, people that worked in these pagan idol worshipping temples, and the Yahwists priestly class would have seen them as an abomination, and might have themselves had vilified them as being prostitutes, and then that became like the standard idea. And then later on archaeology is like, well, we don't really know if the temple prostitution was ever actually practiced by Canaanites
Or if it was just a smear campaign by bitter, bitchy priests who, let's face it, were just jealous about the sex they imagined someone else having, which sounds very familiar to the moral panics nowadays.
I haven't finished my commentary. So modern commentators identify him with Sheshonq or Shoshenq, who lived circa 940 through 915 BCE, and was the founder of the 22nd dynasty. There is a topographical list of Shoshenq in the Ammon Temple in Karnak, which according to DeVries describes more than 150 cities in Judah and Israel that Shoshenq claims to have captured, though Jerusalem is not on that list. Fritz writes that according to this list, Shishak crossed the Negev and the northern kingdom, but did not enter the Judean mainland. He thinks that Rehoboam paid tribute to avoid being conquered. He further writes, quote, "The campaign of Shishak can be verified by an extra-biblical source, but as far as further details are concerned, we learn from this list only of the places that were destroyed." End quote. And
okay, that's funny. So Rehoboam, the Bible claims that Shishak came and stole these things from them and blah blah blah, and then like you look at the actual annals and it's like, Judea, who's that? Oh yeah, he paid me off a bit. Okay, whatever.
yeah. And
it's a good idea to be like, no, we totally had whole gold shields. It was totally real, guys. We just had to replace them because this asshole took them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And just to piss Lawrence off, Cogan notes that this list was not completed in antiquity, and according to Kitchen, this was due to the king's death. Kitchen predates Shoshenq's conquest to Jerusalem by a year or two. He also dates Rehoboam's ascension to the throne at 931 BCE, and so determined Shoshenq's ruling years to be 945 through 924 BCE.
And as we all know, Tomer always listens to Kenneth Kitchen.
Uh-huh.
No.
Hey, you can
Lying
listen to
fuck.
someone for the comedic value. Isn't that what we all do with Kent Oved?
Kitchen wrote a book about the historicity of the Old Testament, and it was trash.
I'm sure it was. I believe you.
Mhm. Okay, and finally, 29 through 31, Fritz comments, along with the standard reference to the annals of the kings of Judah, the common note on the death and burial, and the mention of the successor, the concluding formula contains a notice on the continuing war between both states. A similar remark is found in 15 verses 7, 16, and 32. The notice was probably written by D.H. to emphasize the tensions between the two states. However, there was no attempt in the course of history to re-establish the unity of the monarchy by a war. The conflict was most likely limited to incidents at the border. Now, I only have 2 Christians, but it's amusing. I will say that. So we'll start off with Origen, who I'm going to quote directly from the homilies on the Gospel of Luke 28:2. He writes, "Our Lord and Savior," wait, just to make clear, our Lord and Savior, had come for this. Shut up. Our Lord and Savior had come for this end, to take on himself humanity's sins. God, quote, made him who had committed no sin to be sin for our sake, end quote. 2 Corinthians 5:21. For this reason, he came down into the world and took on the person of sinners and depraved people. He willed to be born from the stock of Solomon, whose sins have been recorded, and from Rehoboam, whose transgressions are reported, and from the rest of them, many of whom did evil in the sight of the Lord.
Right. So his ancestors were sinners. At least, well, one version of his ancestors were these particular sinners, so that he could more perfectly embody their sin and take it on, despite the fact that he's supposedly doing it for the whole world by default. Sure, Jan.
Mm-hmm. And Ishodad wrote that the prostitution practiced at the time of Rehoboam was spread by demons who wanted to corrupt God's creatures.
You know what? Demons need love too. Okay? Demons need love too. Maybe they just needed a hug.
I want to know how demons are like legislating these practices and such. Are they like there are like demon administrators?
Well, he writes.
Surely, yes.
I
Are the prostitutes also demons? Because I mean, if they are, you could advertise that and pay more for it.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
A while ago, this was years ago, Ruben did a video on Christian demonology. So that's still that's on the channel somewhere.
That sounds fun. That sounds really fun.
There's a lot.
I should quote from him directly from the books of Sessions, 1 Kings 14:24. He writes, "This is the first form of that prostitution. Before being united in marriage according to the law, the virgins had intercourse with the priests of the demons. A second form took place when, in the course of 1 or 2 years, the virgins devoted themselves to prostitution for the satisfaction of Satan and later became property of men. That is, they sat along the roads and sold their bodies."
Wait. What do you mean they did it for the satisfaction of Satan? Because I thought it was God who was watching all of us and sees us when we're sleeping and knows when we're awake and, puts us on the good or the bad list. So basically, as the certain C.K. Lewis said, basically we're porn for God, whether we like it or not. So how is being God's porn for the satisfaction of Satan?
That's because God shares the tapes with him.
Oh my God. This is Satan hacked his Pornhub password, didn't he?
Yeah,
He's
got special rights.
They had the special Zoom calls back in the day with the pentagram dial-up.
Oh yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm done here.
I'm sorry.
All right.
Come on, it's
All right.
Christians. We have to laugh.
I guess.
All right. Opinion from the panel. Are we
Yes.
moving 15?
Yes.
Oh,
We haven't done like 3 chapters in a while, so I think
Okay.
yes.
Doing 15 is fine, yeah.
Okay. Well, I just need to hear it. Who's reading the next one?
Lawrence
I
should.
suppose I can read it because this is about Asa, and Asa kills a whole lot of people.
Ooh.
And that's the title of the children's bedtime story tonight. Asa kills a whole lot of people.
Yeah. So
Very
read up
godly.
through 24.
Now in the 18th year of King Jeroboam, son of Nebat, Abijam began to reign over Judah. He reigned for 3 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Ma'akah, daughter of Abishalom. He committed all the sins that his father did before him. That's a lot of sins.
Yes.
His heart was not true to the Lord his God, like the heart of his father David. Nevertheless, for David's sake, the Lord his God gave him a lamp in Jerusalem, setting up his son after him and establishing Jerusalem, because David did what was right in the sight of the Lord, and did not turn aside from anything that he commanded him all the days of his life, except in the matter of Uriah the Hittite. The war begun.
I feel like they forgot about that.
Yeah, right. They just stick it at the end, like, except for that. The war begun between Rehoboam and Jeroboam continued all the days of his life. The rest of the acts of Abijam and all that he did, Are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah?
No.
There was war between Abijam and Jeroboam. Abijam slept with his ancestors, and they buried him in the city of David. Then his son Asa succeeded him. So this is still all in Judah. So this is the line of Rehoboam. In the 20th year of King Jeroboam of Israel, Asa began to reign over Judah. He reigned 41 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Ma'akah, daughter of Abishalom. Asa did what was right in the sight of the Lord, as his father David had done. He put away the illicit priests out of the land and removed all the idols that his ancestors had made.
Just to be clear, the illicit priests are the Keddashim. So
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
Thanks
yeah.
for clarification.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. He also removed his mother Makkah from being queen mother because she had made an abominable image for Asherah. Asa cut down her image and buried it at the Wadi Kidron. But the high places were not taken away. Nevertheless, the heart of Asa was true to the Lord all his days. He brought into the house of the Lord the votive gifts of his father and his own votive gifts, silver, gold, and utensils. There was war between Asa and King Baasha of Israel all their days. King Baasha of Israel went up against Judah and built Ramah to prevent anyone from going out or coming in to King Asa of Judah. Then Asa took all the silver and the gold that were left in the treasuries of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's house and gave them into the hands of his servants. King Asa sent them to King Ben-Hadad, son of Tabrimon, son of Hezion of Aram, who resided in Damascus, saying, "Let there be an alliance between me and you, like that between my father and your father. I am sending you a present of silver and gold. Go, break your alliance with King Baasha of Israel, so that he may withdraw from me." Ben-Hadad listened to King Asa and sent the commanders of his armies against the cities of Israel. He conquered Ijon, Dan, Abel Beth Ma'akah, and Chinneroth, with all the land of Naphtali. When Baasha heard of it, he stopped building Ramah and lived in Tirzah. Then King Asa made a proclamation to all Judah. None was exempt. They carried away the stones of Ramah and its timber with which Baasha had been building. With them, King Asa built Geba of Benjamin and Mizpah. Now the rest of all the acts of Asa, all his power, and all that he did, and the cities that he built, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? But in his old age he was diseased in his feet. Then Asa slept with his ancestors and was buried with his ancestors in the city of his father David. His son Jehoshaphat succeeded him. Quite a few things. So, first of all, in the beginning there, we have another case of like, you did what wasn't so great, but because David was so great, we're gonna give you all this stuff, except for when we're not. The reign of Asa, right? So I mean the killing we get into a little bit later, but the removal of the idols, especially it it says there in verse 14 that the high places were not taken away. This is also a very common Deuteronomistic refrain where even though someone did all that was right in the sight of the Lord, like they didn't get rid of the high places. So even if they got rid of the idols and even like, bad priests, priests that weren't from the proper line or something, even then the centrality of worship is one of the important parts. And it is also important where so Asa cut down her image and for the image of Asherah and burned it at the Wadi Kidron. So at the Kidron River, that is where I think near the end of the Deuteronomistic history, where they are destroying high places. That is where they throw like all the ashes into it. Actually, hold on. When they finally destroy Jeroboam's golden calves, that is the pieces are thrown into the Kidron River. So it is important here that the Kidron River is like, if you are throwing away a cult image, like this is the place that you're going to throw it away, in this specific river, in this valley. So it is significant there. Yeah, Aaron.
Yeah. My translation has
listen
he
to the
burnt it
dinosaur.
in the valley rather than.
And then this this teaming up with Ben Hadad, that would be a very Assyrian name, because Hadad was a god. He was an Assyrian god, I think.
So it doesn't really match.
And I got a question for you,
This
Lawrence.
is
The
Yoram,
book
but-
of the Annals of the Kings of Judah.
Yeah.
Is that one of the many books that the Bible makes reference to, but that doesn't even exist anymore?
Yes. Yeah. Unfortunately, it does not exist. It is a bummer.
Funny that God wouldn't preserve that if he's going to reference it.
Right. It
You
would have
have
been nice if
DeVries
we
who
had.
says that the book is fictitious. So
Yeah.
not DeVries, Fritz. Sorry.
Yeah. I think that and some other texts that are referenced, I think they probably existed at some point. Annals were everywhere. Every place had annals.
Yeah,
So-
they would have had some annals for the kingdom at some point somewhere.
Yeah.
For the
as you do.
historical ones, I can imagine that they did have this, and then they're just claiming that these earlier kings were.
Yeah, and even then,
mentioned in it as
like
well.
even annals that reference fictitious kings also reference real ones.
Hmm.
So like the Turn canon, it references a whole bunch of real pharaohs, but it begins with a whole bunch of god kings and spirit kings. So
Although
like, go ahead.
Sorry, no, go on. Sorry, I cut you off.
So I was gonna say, like, so even though it does reference fictitious rulers, it also very much references real ones.
Yeah. Well, it's important that every ruler that exists should have 6 to 7 very dramatic and important predecessors that didn't exist at all.
Though
there are claims. I think there are claims that it's, I think the traditional claim is that this is referring to Chronicles, but the Chronicles doesn't actually expand on all these things that it says it's supposed to expound on. So. And
I should note that Chronicles itself, at least 2 Chronicles 13:22, specifies that all the words, all the events of Abiah's reign are written in the Midrash, or in the story of the prophet Iddo. So,
another thing we don't have.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll start on verse 1 about Abiah. The Hebrew Bible reads Abiyam, meaning mem in the end.
Yeah.
In 2 Chronicles 12:16 and chapter 13, he is called Abiah. DeVries writes that this name is found fairly frequently and, quote, has the additional advantage of reflecting late concepts of orthodoxy, end quote. He takes Aviyam to mean my father is Yam, who is the mythical sea god known from Ugaritic literature. He writes that this name was interpreted metaphorically and in the early Judite court and was changed to Abiah, my father is Yahweh. Fritz, however, writes that while the reading my father is Yam is possible, it cannot be verified.
Also, to be clear, it's not like the Israelites got rid of Yam. Still very much extant in the text.
Yam.
There are so many references. Not just to, like the sea or anything, but like references to like the mythos. Like in
it's
Job
also
38.
interesting. It's interesting though that Jeroboam's oldest son, the one who dies after being sick, is also called Abiah or Avia, which is my father is Yahweh, as opposed to being a pagan god or something. Which might be the reason why the Deuteronomistic are like, oh yeah, he was he did good in God's, he's got a nice name. He probably was a good person, so that's why, God let him off or whatever.
Oh yeah, let him be buried decently and with rights. But yeah,
Like his dad.
yeah. Well, it's just, he's so special. He doesn't have to be eaten of dogs in the wilderness. It's I don't know. It's weird. It's interesting though, like I was talking about last time, how the division between the two kingdoms and the attempt to weave together their histories once they are recognized to be distinct entities with at least some historical context that needs to be partly woven into the story, that the polytheism becomes more and more and more apparent and undeniable. And sometimes, as in the story I was talking about last time, oh, look at your puppy, give your boobs. Then you have, it's just impossible to make sense of with the most ridiculous contortions. You're trying and trying and trying to make it this monotheistic God. And the minute you realize, oh, wait, those are not the same God. Those are just two different gods. And it just all makes sense.
Okay, now in verse 2, Ma'acha, daughter of Abishalom. In verse 10, she's described as Asa's mother, and we'll talk more about the relationship between Abiam and Asa in verse 10. According to 2 Chronicles 13:2, her name was Mikaya, in Hebrew, Michayahu, daughter of Uriel of Gibeah. Josephus in Antiquities 8:249 calls her, quote, Makane, daughter of Tamar, daughter of Absalom, end quote, a reading found in the Messianic Recension. DeVries wrote that the chronicler fabricated her name for exegetical harmonization. Although Gersonides wrote that Ma'acha and Micaiah were the same person, Sweeney comments, one might speculate that Abiam's mother actually was Micaiah bat Uriel. Rehoboam's marriage to a woman from Gibeah, the home of Saul, would have cemented both Solomon's and Rehoboam's hold over this potential center of resistance to Davidic rule. Her early death, however, would have led to the elevation of another of Rehoboam's wives, Ma'acha bat Abishalom, as the Gebirah, or queen mother, and thus facilitate the identification of her as the mother of Abiam. Rehoboam's marriage to the daughter, or more likely the granddaughter, of Absalom makes great sense since her family lineage traces back to King Talmai of Geshur in 2 Samuel 3:3. Such a marriage would enable Rehoboam to attempt an overture to the Aramean kingdom situated on northern Israel's borders.
Sensible. These are all good political moves to cement contact with your neighbors and be friendly and, not kill each other. God doesn't seem to like that. He doesn't like diplomacy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think some of the commentators seem to think that the term mother of his mother could be either referring to his birth mother, or it could be referring to, when he became king, this was the queen mother at the time was still his grandmother or something like that.
The highest ranking woman in the harem would be the king, the mother either of the current king or possibly the future king, his primary wife, whoever gave him the first most important son. It's possible. It's very much a thing in that culture that once a woman has a child, she's never referred to as a wife again. She is the mother of my son, blah, blah, blah. Her whole identity is just about getting that distinction as being the mother of so-and-so, because, women aren't people.
Okay, on 3-5, here Abiam is compared to David, the founder of the Judean dynasty, who according to Fritz sets the standard for all his successors. Sweeney writes that the emphasis on Abiam following the sins of his ancestors, quote, suggests the interests of both the Hezekiah and the Josian de-aged editions, end quote. Cogan notes that the reference to the murder of Uriah the Hittite is the only one out of all the praises to David which D.H. gives, as we see in 3:6, 9:4, and 11:38. Since this critical phrase does not appear in the Septuagint, he writes that most commentators see it as a late post-D.H. expansion, which was not included in the Hebrew text, which was used by the Greek translations.
Yeah, that makes sense because there's but in the early, up till now, we've seen it a lot, David was, he didn't behave like David, who didn't behave like David, who was perfect, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, but what about all of the bad things he did? And now it's like, they decided to add in, except for the case of blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Okay, on verse 6, the mention of the war between Rehoboam and Jeroboam seems irrelevant, given that it was already mentioned in 1430. As such, this verse is absent from the Septuagint and the Lucanic Recension. Cogan suggested that this verse is a dictography of 1430. DeVries writes that verse 6 and 1430 probably go back to the same archival item, as part of the archives concerning hostility under Rehoboam and Jeroboam. On verse 7, there was war between Abiam and Jeroboam. More details about this war are revealed in 2 Chronicles 13, which Sweeney takes as more likely based on authentic historical tradition. He writes, quote, "This suggests that D.H. downplays these events to present Abiam's reign as a paradigm for the condemnation of subsequent Judean monarchs, much as the account of Othniel in Judges 3:7-11 serves as a paradigm for the accounts of the judges in Judges 3-16.
Yeah, I could see that.
On verse 10, Ma'acha, daughter of Abishalom. According to verse 2, she was the mother of Abiam, who was Asa's father. Fritz writes that either Abiam and Asa had the same mother, and therefore were brothers, or Ma'acha remained in office after the death of Abiam, so that Queen Mother, quote-unquote, is a title, rather than a description of the family relationship. Likewise, Kimchi and Gersonides wrote that Ma'acha was Asa's grandmother. Sweeney notes two factors which suggest that Abiam and Asa were not brothers. The identification in 2 Chronicles 13:2 of Micaiah as Abiam's mother, and the emphasis placed in verse 13 and 2 Chronicles 15:16 on Asa's removal of his mother, Ma'acha, from her role as queen. Cogan notes Provan's opinion that Asa was, quote, the product of an incestuous relationship between Abiam and Ma'acha, end quote, adding to Abiam's flawed record. He writes, however, that, quote, this smacks of harmonizing exegesis, end quote.
No.
Now, on verses 11-12, Fritz comments, Asa is the first king since Solomon who is judged positively. This judgment is justified by his actions concerning the purity of the cult. On the one hand, he stopped the custom of sanctifying people, and on the other hand, he put away the idols. Both remarks are not very concrete and can probably be regarded as Deuteronomistic commendation.
They are a titch vague.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, what are you going to do?
Mm-hmm. On verse 13, Queen Mother. In Hebrew, it's Gvira. Cogan writes that the Gvira was a woman of high status, according to Genesis 16:8 and 9, a reading reflected by early translations, like the Septuagint, which reads leader, Vulgate princess, and Peshitta of high status. Here, it refers to a royal title, though the exact definition of the role which the Gevira held is unclear. Some, like Susan Ackerman, suggested that the Gevira held cultic functions, based on what is told about Ma'acha and her support of the Asherah. Others, like Shoshana Binun, DeVoe, and Fritz, compared the Gevira with the Hittite Tawanana, who, according to Hittite court life, was active in the royal life and the temple during her husband's life, and even after his death. Still others, like Tzafrira ben Barak, suggested that the Gevirot were just vigorous women who brought to themselves a status in the royal court. Cogan, however, writes that all opinions are conjectural.
True enough.
Cogan writes the obvious.
Cogan's like Hebrew edition is the most recent one of all the commentaries. So,
all right, I've got a couple comments. My Unfinished Journey offers $6.66 and says, "Hail Nero, hail Aaron and Panel, and hail God and Satan's shared Pornhub account."
Oh, I want that to be a meme so bad.
My unfinished sock. I have questions about that name. My unfinished sock offers $2 and says, "Don't hack G's pH like and share. Don't hack G's pH. Like and share the stream instead."
Yes.
And I think for that comment, my unfinished sock is a fitting name.
Yes. Everybody leave God's Pornhub account alone. There are some things you don't want to know. The existence of Rule 34 is the type of thing that you just don't want to know. You just
Mom,
respect
don't
it.
pick up that sock. That's my special sock.
Oh, time to do your own laundry, son.
Why do you have a cardboard cutout of a sock?
And then Nowhart offers 50 Swedish kroner, thank you, and says, "Everyone be like, what is woman? No one be like, how is woman?"
True. They never ask how I am.
I never ask you.
It's true.
Now on that same verse, a repulsive image. In Hebrew, it's mifletzet. The word appears only here and in the parallel 2 Chronicles 15:16. Rabbi Yehuda in Talmud Avodah Zarah 44a took the mifletzet to be an object, quote, that intensifies mafli licentiousness, leitzanuta, end quote. Rabbi Yosef expounds, quote, she fashioned upon the idol the likeness of a male organ, and she would engage in sexual activity with it daily, end quote. This interpretation is followed by Rashi and Kara.
But it was a wooden dildo.
Oh, I hope they had good lacquers. Because that is not where you want splinters. You really don't. Maybe she got a stone dildo and put it, because isn't like one of the oldest human artifacts in the history of the world.
That doesn't
isn't
sound
it like
any
a
better.
28,000-year-old stone dildo?
Oh, these poor people.
Maybe.
These poor women.
Men have not been satisfying us for 30,000 years.
Okay. Kimchi derived mifletzet. Sorry?
I just want to say, mifletzet in modern Hebrew means a monster.
Yeah, it's monster in Hebrew. So Kimchi derived mifletzet from the root pei lamet tzadik, horror or shudder, since, quote, her horror rested upon her worshippers, end quote. Likewise, horror.
Oh, horror. Okay.
Yeah, I
We're
had
all
to
scared of her and
emphasize
her
that
magical
her
vagina.
It
horror.
would make sense if her horror also rested upon the worshippers.
Oh, shut up. Yeah. Likewise, DeVries renders detestable cult object. Fritz renders abominable image. Sweeney monstrosity. The modern Hebrew. Septuagint has she conducted a meeting in her grove. Vulgate has filthy idol. Targum has an idol, and Peshitta has a festival.
So the only way I can really blaspheme and piss God off is to get a big dildo.
Oh no.
Maybe there'll be some after Christmas sales.
Might as well make it a tree.
Dedicate your poles to Asherah.
Oh yes, I will do that. I will dedicate all my poles to Asherah.
Have poles. Never mind. In verse 14, Rashi and Kara wrote that the high places were, quote, private altars upon which they had become accustomed to sacrifice to heaven since Shiloh had been destroyed until the temple was built, end quote. DeVries writes that although Asa did not suppress the country shrines, quote, DH is in no mood to blame him for that, end quote. Fritz writes that DH moves his concern about the purity of the cult far back. Moreover, the addition of cultic items into the temple in verse 15 is mentioned positively. He writes, quote, the attitude of the king to the temple in Jerusalem is the sole standard for his evaluation by DH.
Yeah, I mean, the shrines or high places, it seems to have been like this is a much older tradition, and since people weren't necessarily using them for idol worship, they were like using them to worship Yahweh, just not in the temple. And it's like the idea of like, oh, now the temple is built, you can't worship on these high places, is a later idea. It probably wasn't seen as bad, so it wasn't something.
Well, the Deuteronomistic voice is very well known for being all about, but it's all about the temple. No, the temple is you get here and give us your offerings and stop doing the old things.
Right. But I guess they wanted to, that this King Asa, he was good. He got rid of all of the terrible, abominations and temple prostitutes and whatnot. But he didn't fully do what we're doing, which is bringing you back to the temple.
He didn't get it all the way. He only did some of what we have heard of.
Okay, now 16 and 17, DeVries comments, a summary statement from the book of the Chronicles of the Judite Kings introduces the political narrative of verses 16 through 22. Baasha came up, quote unquote, i.e. attacked Judah, apparently without encountering effective resistance. Most of Benjamin's ancestral territory had been under Jerusalem's control in 1221, but now Baasha fortified Ramah, Samuel's resistance, in 1 Samuel 7:17, about 3 miles south of the traditional border. As the narrator sees it, this was to prevent northerners from having contact with Asa. That the title King Asa predominates in these verses suggests that the writer is a loyal partisan of this king, though Baasha's true purpose may have been to defend against Judite aggression.
I mean, it's interesting that we bring up Baasha now, who is the next king of Israel after, what's his name, dies, what's his name? Nadav.
Oh.
Right? So Nadav, son of Jeroboam, is the king. We see, for example, that when Abiyam becomes king, it says this happened in the, was it 19th year of, or 18th year of the reign of Jeroboam. And then his son Asa becomes king. It says he's actually became king in the 20th year, even though it says his father ruled for 3 years. I don't know if you mentioned that at all. But whatever. And then now we're just getting Baasha, and we don't have anything about how Baasha became king after Nadav. He's not even the son of Nadav, right? He's from a different tribe. So we just get him brought into the story of the kings of Judah, but we don't actually know who he is yet. Mm-hmm. He's just mentioned, oh, the king of Israel, Baasha, which makes sense, since Jeroboam, Nadav wasn't king for that long, that we get that something would have changed during the reign of Asa, because he reigned for quite a long time. But it doesn't. Yeah, we don't
You're
have.
Thinking there was a little bit of intriguing overthrow of the king kind of vibe going on. Sounds fun.
Yeah, so I'm guessing we will get to that later. It's just you would have thought that the storyline would have kind of tried to be chronological, but it's being like it's going chronological, but since Asa ruled for a long time, it's just focusing on Asa now, and it's just bringing up characters that we don't know who they are yet, and then maybe afterwards they'll go back to
like speaking to a Tolkien fan who's actually read the Silmarillion.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, on 18, Ben-Hadad, son of Tabrimon, the son of Chezion, or Chezion, yeah. Cogan comments, Ben-Hadad, son of the god Hadad, is the title of several kings of Aram Damascus, in 2 Kings 6:24. The present Ben-Hadad is the first with this name. His identity has a tortured scholarly history. Albright read the king's name and his ancestry as given in the present verse in the very worn lines of the Melkot stele, but this now seems highly unlikely. Early suggestions identified his grandfather Chetzion with the brigand Rezon, who founded a dynasty in Damascus in 1 Kings 11:23 through 25, basing themselves on a supposed corruption of an original Chetzon. For example, Thenius, Klosterman, and Burney. The name Chezion is now known in an Akkadian transcription, Chadianu, on the Pazarchik stela, a name borne by a later king of Damascus in the early 8th century BCE. Tabrimon is otherwise unknown. It is an Aramean name meaning the god Raman is good. Raman was a manifestation of the storm god Hadad, and in this form is referred to in 2 Kings 5:18.
Yeah, I mean,
On-
this
sorry.
character, I don't think we really have, even though it seems like they've got like, his father's name and his grandfather's name, and they seem like it would make sense for a king of Aram to have those names. We don't really have like any good extra biblical evidence for this particular character. There is, there is an earlier king that's mentioned called, I think the Bible calls him Hadad-ezer. Yeah, Hadad-ezer, and that one is maybe a different Ben Hadad, but that actually existed. Like there was a.
It's a dynastic name, so it's very flexible when you're writing your histories around it.
Yeah, that's it seems that even though we've already mentioned Shishak, who is, we have we do have extra biblical references. It doesn't mean that now on everything is going to be historical.
Oh God no.
Right.
This is
Well, I mean, like,
vaguely
obviously-
tinged.
Trending.
No, I mean, not even events.
We're
I mean,
trending to
Yeah.
historical.
Yeah.
Which,
so
considering how far we've been from it to this, we're like,
Right,
oh, look, there's a crumb of historicity, yay!
Yeah.
I mean, characters and stuff. Like, it's very possible that Rehoboam was a real king and Asa maybe, or like, these characters might be real, but we have no evidence for any of them. So here's one guy, but it's going to be a while until we get to the next one, which I think is Omri. Is probably the next historical figure that we're going to come across.
Oh, the next one that can be extra biblically verified.
Yeah.
Okay, on 19, let there be a treaty between me and you as there was between my father and your father. The Hebrew Bible reads, there is a pact between you and me, between my father and your father. Such a pact between Abiam and Tabrimon is unmentioned elsewhere. Although Noth proposed to read the noun clause as a wish, DeVries writes that there is no solid basis for this proposal.
Also, there's no mention of him having any sort of pact with Baasha either. So,
yeah.
It
On that
could
same
just
verse,
be courtly language. Sorry, it could be courtly language again, and having had any kind of positive interactions before, being leaning on that maybe a little more than is entirely reasonable.
So yeah, on that same verse, I am sending you a gift. Hebrew for gift is shochad. The word shochad can also refer to bribe and usually carries a negative connotation, as we see in statements like bribe, shochad blinds the clear-sighted in Exodus 23:8 and Deuteronomy 16:19, and who vindicate him who is in the wrong in return for a bribe, shochad, in Isaiah 5:23 and Ezekiel 22:12. Cogan writes that DH uses the term shochad to criticize Asa for turning to a foreign king who robbed the treasuries of the temple and the palace. He notes a similar semantic polemic use in the Royal Assyrian literature from the days of Sargon II. At the eve of the conquest of Babylon by Sargon, he blamed Merodak Baladan, the Chaldean king of Babylon, for sending a tribe, Tatu, to Shutruk Nachunte, king of Elam, so that he may help him. On verse 20, Sweeney comments, the cities taken by Ben-Hadad are all located in the northern Galilean territory of Naphtali to the north of Baasha's home tribe of Issachar. Iyon is identified with Merj Ayun to the north of modern Metula along the Israelite Aramean border. Dan, identified with Tel Dan in the Hule Valley, is the major temple city of Jeroboam located along the north-south road connecting Aramean Katna with Israelite Chatzor. Abel Beth Ma'acha is identified with Tel Abil al-Kamch, located near Metula, at the junction of the Hule and Tebeka valleys at the tributaries of the Jordan. It is situated to the south and west of Iyon and Dan, where it functions as the gateway, quote-unquote, between Israel and Aram. The reference to the Kinneret along the land of Naphtali refers to the northern Galilean territory of Naphtali, situated along the northern and western shores of the Sea of Galilee.
So it mentions places inside the area of Naphtali, and then it says all of Naphtali. So what's the point?
Maybe these were just like the iconic bits. Like,
yeah,
I got New York and LA and all the rest of America combined.
yeah. And by the way, the Kinneret, I mean, I think there was also a settlement called Kinneret, but it's most probably here referring to like the lake and the area around it. It's not called the Sea of anything. This lake is never called a sea until people decided that the Sea of Galilee in the New Testament is this lake, and whatever.
Now 21 and 22, Fritz comments, in the face of this threat, Baasha returns to his capital Tirza. The removal of the danger is not mentioned. Asa, however, uses this chance to fortify Geba and Mitzpah as border posts to provide Judah with a buffer zone and to secure the road to Jerusalem. In a cunning maneuver, Asa achieves a correction of the borderline and thus maintains an advantage for Judah. The marginal existence of Jerusalem in the north of the Judean territory is changed by the annexation of the tribal territory of Benjamin.
Okay, that kind of makes sense. I wonder if there's any like oh, you know, why is Ramah a place that should be fortified, and it's kind of partially fortified or something like that, and here are these other towns further south that are fortified, and then this story is like, oh yeah, this is what happened. You know, one guy just started fortifying this place, and then the other guy made him run away, and then he stole the materials and fortified the other places.
So yeah, it was coitus interruptus kind of a situation.
And finally, on 23...
Erectus interruptus.
Erectus interruptus, exactly.
Because, like, you know, making a building. Yeah.
And finally, on 23, in his old age, however, his feet became diseased. We find only two more notices regarding the disease of a king. Azariah's leprosy in 2 Kings 15:5 and Hezekiah's illness in 2 Kings 20:1-11. Cogan writes that the implication seems to be that his foot ailment led to his death. The chronicler adds a critical note, quote, ill as he was, he still did not turn to the Lord, but to physicians, end quote. 2 Chronicles 16:12, which Cogan takes to be a midrashic preaching, quote unquote, built on the wordplay between Asa and the Aramaic Asiya, which means physician. The exact, yeah.
So I was gonna say, like, they were like, oh, one Asa, he went to the doctors instead of going to praying.
Oh my gosh!
What an idiot!
Wow, religious assholes telling you not to go to the doctor has always been a thing. Look at that.
Yeah. The exact identification of the disease is unclear. Rav Yehuda in Talmud Sanhedrin 48b identified the disease with gout, in Aramaic pudgara, and Rav Nachman describes the pain as, quote, similar to the pain of a needle piercing live flesh, end quote. This identification is accepted by Kara and DeVries, who notes that gout is often described as the ailment of kings, quote unquote, resulting from subsistence on a rich diet. Similarly...
I'm sorry, when did Rabbi Nachman become a biblical commentator?
I mean, in the Talmud.
Oh, I thought you meant like Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. Okay.
Oh, no, there is a Rav Nachman there. Not...
Oh, okay. Rabbi Nachman, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so similarly, Chrysostom writes, quote, gluttony and drunkenness and sloth give rise to sickness of this kind, end quote. Cogan notes Wiseman and Jones's suggestion, quote, a peripheral obstructive vascular disease with ensuing gangrene, end quote, which he writes as, quote, not more provable, end quote. And I like this. Sweeney, however, takes the feet to be a euphemism for the genitals and suggests that the disease was prostate cancer.
It's amazing how many
Oh,
excuses
buddy,
people
buddy.
will come up with when they don't know
That's
the
a
real
bit of a
answer.
tug. I mean,
A bit of a tug. Lol. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it for my part.
We may all be going to hell, but the jokes will be immaculate.
Comedians are better in hell.
It's true. It's true. There's no way I'm going to pass up the opportunity to party with George Carlin.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
If I go to heaven, who am I stuck with? Dane fucking Cook?
Ew!
there was one. There
Get
was.
me behind me.
Oh, and Bill Cosby.
Oh,
sorry, this was-
Ew.
There was a commentary that I read on the last chapter that I forgot to mention, which was something about what's his name? The king, Jehoram. What's his name?
Jeroboam?
Jeroboam.
Yeah.
Jeroboam. So it's like God came to Jeroboam in a dream, and he said to him, come, become good again, and you will walk in paradise with me and the son of Yishai, or Yishael, the king, the boy king, I'm guessing it's referring to. And then Jeroboam is like, oh, but who's gonna walk in the front? And God is like, oh, the son of Yishai. And he's like, no, it's okay, I'll go to hell.
All right. Lawrence, where were you?
So I'm going to be starting with 25, verse 25.
Okay.
Nadab, son of Jeroboam, began to reign over Israel in the 2nd year of King Asa of Judah. He reigned over Israel 2 years. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, walking in the way of his ancestor, and in the sin that he caused Israel to commit. Baasha, son of Ahiah, of the house of Issachar, conspired against him, and Baasha struck him down at Gibbethon, which belonged to the Philistines, for Nadab and all Israel were laying siege to Gibbethon. So Baasha killed Nadab in the 3rd year of King Asa of Judah and succeeded him. As soon as he was king, he killed all the house of Jeroboam. He left to the house of Jeroboam not one who breathed, until he had destroyed it, according to the word of the Lord that he spoke by his servant Ahiah the Shilonite.
Because God is petty like that.
Yep. Because of the sins of Jeroboam that he committed, and that he caused Israel to commit, and because of the anger to which he provoked the Lord, the God of Israel. Now the rest of the acts of Nadab and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel?
I don't know.
I wish I knew. There was war between Asa and King Baasha of Israel all their days.
Interesting, they didn't
continue.
change the order.
Yeah. In
'Cause,
the
like,
3rd
Abasha
year,
is the subject. They should have changed it. Whatever. Yeah.
in the 3rd year of King Asa of Judah, Baasha, son of Ahiah, began to rule over all Israel at Tirzah. He reigned 24 years. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, walking in the way of Jeroboam and in the sin that he caused Israel to commit. It is quite interesting that there seems to be already a retribution for the things that Jeroboam did, but it just wasn't enough. Not enough people died.
It's almost like if you raise up someone to conspire against the king and to stab him in the back and take over, he's gonna be a great person.
Yeah, the best. We have the best. It's interesting though that you get rid of you take the kingdom away mostly from David's line, and you get these other kings, and all of them are evil. All of them are evil in the sight of the Lord. Every single king of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, which basically means didn't kill all the idol worshippers. It doesn't matter. This has nothing to do with his tax, behavior. It has nothing to do with his treatment of the poor. He just, let someone worship who they wanted and had freedom of religion, or possibly limited freedom of religion, but wasn't quite genocidal and petty enough for God. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it really gives the vibe of this is being written from the Judite perspective, where we had a few good kings, but all of yours sucked and God hates you. Nah.
Mm-hmm.
And along with that, is also the effort of trying to centralize all of the cult into one place, which in today's day and age, it seems kind of weird because everybody's trying to build churches everywhere, and it doesn't matter how many churches you have. God was really interested in this time of man's history that he would be worshipped in one place and one place only.
It's almost like the priests of that place were writing it and wanted all the offerings for me.
Mm-hmm. I only have one comment here.
I think there was one king of Israel that was good, which was Yehu, maybe Yeho.
Or goodish.
Yeah, but yeah.
Okay, I only have one comment here, and that is on verses 25 and 30 through 30. Fritz comments, after the introductory formula, verses 25 and 26, only the premature end of his reign due to the revolt of Baasha, in verses 27 through 30, is reported of Nadab, the son of Jeroboam. Nadab had reigned over Israel less than 2 years and is judged negatively, like every king of Israel. He is killed by an unspecified opposition during a military campaign against the Philistines to secure the territory. The resistance to the successor of Jeroboam was either against the new ruler directly or against the dynastic principle. This procedure of getting rid of a dynasty by killing the son and successor is repeated a number of times in the history of Israel, as we see in 16:2, 2 Kings 15 verses 10, 14, 25, and 30. It was probably the rivalry among the tribes and a certain independence toward the king that prevented the establishment of a dynasty, so that the kingship in the northern kingdom is marked by a frequent change of the royal family. And now I only have one Christian, and that is Afrahat, who writes that the devil tried to tempt Asa through his mother, but was defeated.
Yes, but you should honor your father and mother, and anyone who dishonors his father and mother should be put to death. Unless, of course, your mother does something that God doesn't like, in which case you should dishonor her, and that is what is righteous in the name of the Lord. But also, you will still probably die young anyway, because fuck you.
What would a believing Jew say about that interpretation?
About like worshiping, respecting your parents?
No, about the devil's influence on anything.
Oh.
Mm.
Well, I mean, if God wanted, the curse of Jeroboam to affect all of the later Israelites, which the prophecy seems to say he is, then, sending Satan his agent wouldn't make.
Okay, but it's not actually Satan's doing then. Satan's just.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Judaism doesn't see Satan as like, a person.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Satan is the testing. He gets us to do the bad things to see if we'll test and resist him, kind of thing.
There's a bit of conflation between Satan, which is more of like the angel of God and like is the prosecutor in heaven, and what's called the Yetzirah, which is like the evil inclination, which is supposed to be something that's like inside you. So there's a bit of conflation between like Satan, Hasatan, and the Yetzirah. It's almost like it's the same person, and so you have like a little one living inside you. But
God's Yetzirah.
I don't know. I mean, in the story of Job, it kind of sounds a bit like that. Yeah.
Well, one thing that does seem clear, because it's very complex and it depends which book you're reading or whatever, but it does seem clear that in the Hebrew Bible, Satan or the Hasatan is not necessarily acting independently. He's really doing God's bidding.
Yeah.
Whereas by the time Christianity comes in the scene, it's an independent being that's actually going against or working against the people of God or whatever.
It seems like he's an independent contractor, but they require plausible deniability. Sorry.
I know that Saadia Gaon in his commentary on Job said that this Satan described in Job is actually a human being. Yeah.
Interesting.
Wow.
And the reason I stress Hasatan, like, which means the Satan, is just to show that this is not like a name; it's a job title. And there is even like Jewish, like mysticism and stuff that talk about how like an angel is created for one task only, and then it is destroyed and doesn't exist again. So Michael or Gabriel, these aren't even like individuals that have existed for all time. They're just kind of like job titles, and they're recreated every time God needs to do something.
Maybe that's why Satan
you know,
rebelled.
with-
He didn't want to die, so he didn't complete his designated task.
They don't have free will. They're not people. Like in
No, they're
Judaism, angels
computer
are like
programs. I'm
yeah.
just saying maybe he like got
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
level of sentience to go, oh fuck. Nope.
Yeah, maybe. No, it's supposed
Okay,
to be
so I
they're just
have,
like parts of God's essence, and then they just kind of like a candle flame.
So
just
let me
move
get this
around.
straight. So you said what's his name? Sadigon, right?
Sadigon,
right?
yes.
Sadigon. Okay. So his interpretation is that the person or the being that's doing this stuff to Job is a person, a human.
Yes.
So so one day the heavenly beings came to present themselves before the Lord, and the accuser, or Hasatan, also came among them. So that some random dude.
It's not random, right? He's well known in Judaism, but I guess he has like I mean, in the commentary itself, I mean, I think he expounds on this more. But maybe when we get to Job, we'll see.
Okay,
that'll be an
seems
interesting
ridiculous, but okay.
conversation for Job.
There's
Yeah,
actually a
that's-
translation of that.
I haven't
in
had that
English.
one before.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got a comment from Nauhart, who offers 50 Swedish kroner again. Thank you, and says in End of Faith, Sam Harris says religious wars are the same as wars over Star Wars interpretations. It frightens me how true that seems.
Yeah, killing each other over whether Russell's teapot is paisley or polka dot. But it's also something that Alan Watts brought up, which is if you want to have a humane war, but don't make your ideology religious. Just be selfish assholes who want land and shit. Because you will still do bad things, but it will not be nowhere near as brutal and inhumane. You will still keep the resources. It's only when you fight for God that you kill every baby and salt the land and burn everything. The brutality level of just I'm selfish and I want shit is here, and the God said we must slaughter the evils are way the fuck up here. Both are bad, but they are not on the same level.
All right, so our Tomer, you finished your commentary?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. I doubt we're going to move to 16.
No.
Yeah,
Though
definitely
I will say that when we get to 16, I'm going to have another commentator, and that is Stephen L. McKenzie, which his commentary is from 1 Kings 16 through 2 Kings 16. And his commentary is very, very good. I mean, I really love all the commentators on this. I really do.
Okay.
Cool.
All right, then. I guess we will close it up. See you next week. Is next week next year, isn't it?
And next week is next year. And
Yes.
to celebrate the new year, join the Discord.
Yeah. Also burn your Yule offerings up to the new year and just generally engage in every blasphemous activity you can for science.
I don't think I'm going to celebrate this new year, but I am going to continue practicing alcoholism until I get good at it.
Huzzah!
Yeah. See you next year then.
All right. See you next year.
Bye, everybody.